Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. They didn't trust the rest of the Shinomiya family, but they absolutely believed in Shinomiya Kaguya. Because she, like their eldest daughter, possessed supernatural powers. Not just Shinomiya and Hayasaka, everyone who had traveled with them this time had such abilities. Knowing that, they understood exactly what they had to do. Hayasaka's gaze shifted toward the deck. The cruise ship was slowly moving forward. She frowned slightly. We've already set sail? Yes. The security captain responded immediately. That was Lord Amamiya's decision. He said, since you and Ms. Kaguya fainted, this trip should end early. So we departed as instructed. Hayasaka gave a small nod. That was the right call. If Amamiya made that decision, we follow it. She suddenly became curious about what had happened after she and Kaguya lost consciousness. Did anything important happen after we fainted? Yes. The captain nodded right away. Shortly after we departed, we came across a cruise ship from the Hitamoto family. It had a mechanical failure and was stranded at sea. The Hitamoto family? Hayasaka frowned. She remembered them, an extremely traditional and rigid old family. In fact, they were the original owners of the volcanic island, which had been purchased from them. Lately, they'd been offloading assets and downsizing. That was the only reason the volcanic island had been sold for just $600,000. Did we let them board? Yes. At first, we refused. But then we found out Miss Mori's father was aboard that ship, so we went to consult with her before proceeding. Hearing that, Hayasaka relaxed. In that case, it's fine. Just maintain security, especially near Miss Kaguya's room. If anyone approaches, increase vigilance. Chapter 188, Completely Erasing the Traces. Ms. Suzuki, thank you very much for your help. An elderly man with white hair bowed deeply to Sanoko, expressing his gratitude with utmost respect. He was dressed in a traditional kimono, a dark blue haori with a light gray lining and a pale yellow hakama. Sanoko, who was being thanked, waved her hands dismissively. Oh, old man, I've already told you, this cruise ship doesn't belong to me. It's Shinomiya's. If you want to thank someone, you should be thanking Shinomiya. The old man, with his somewhat stiff demeanor, didn't consider his behavior shameful. No, I will thank Miss Shinomiya in person later. His rigidness gave Sanoko a headache. Grandpa, your stubbornness really hasn't changed at all. The old man had always been this stiff and traditional, even when upset. He was also very formal with people. No matter how young someone was, if they weren't from the same social class, his attitude toward them would become extremely respectful, almost excessively so. This was a way of humbling oneself before the higher-ups. Sometimes, knowing when to bow your head was an art form. Being arrogant in front of someone more powerful rarely ends well. Attitude often determines the success or failure of a deal. Is this a kind of condescension? Of course it is. Is it flattery? Absolutely. But when one's own abilities or even one's family's capabilities are lacking, then humility becomes a type of currency. All that deference is part of the transaction. While Sanoko was dealing with the old man, Ran was staring at her father in curiosity and helplessness. Dad, how did you and this kid end up out at sea? I should be asking you that. Kogoro couldn't help but ask the question back. I brought this kid along because I accepted a commission on a nearby island. But wouldn't you know it, we stumbled into a murder case. After we finally wrapped it up and were preparing to leave, we ran into a ship in the harbor with engine trouble. If we hadn't been taken in by another cruise ship, we'd have been stranded on that island for at least half a month. The island was that remote, ships only stopped by once every 2 weeks. Without help, Kogoro would have been stuck there for quite a while. He nearly broke down just thinking about it. Luckily, they encountered a large cruise ship chartered by a wealthy family. But even then, things didn't go smoothly. There was another malfunction at sea. If it weren't for the second cruise ship that happened to pass by, Kogoro suspected he and Conan would have ended up on a sea survival trip. And then, unexpectedly, He saw his own daughter on that second cruise ship. That gave Kogoro all kinds of feelings. By the way, what are you doing on a cruise ship over the weekend? And what's with the Shinomiya that the second young lady mentioned earlier? Ran explained. This time, I'm on the cruise because it's one of our club's outdoor activities. The Occult Research Club does these excursions when we have free time. We investigate mysterious cases and do some field work. Outdoor excursions? Kogoro looked at her like she was crazy. Last time it was Tsukekage Island, and now it's a cruise ship. Ran, is your club even operating legally? Would the principal of Titan High School even approve of something this ridiculous? Seriously. As a former high school student himself, Edagawa Konan was very familiar with how strict Titan High's standards were. There was no way a club like that would get approval. Ran gave a small smile. Well, that's thanks to Shinomiya-san. She made a donation to the school when she enrolled. Kogoro's expression changed instantly. That was something only a rich heiress could pull off. And all the club expenses are paid by the members. The school doesn't pay a single yen. What? Kogoro's eyes popped open. Don't tell me you're paying too? What are you talking about? My allowance isn't even enough to cover snacks. Ran grumbled, then clarified. It's Sonoko, Shinomiya-san, Sanzanin, and Seijinomiya who pay. Kogoro was stunned by the last three names. Uncle, Shinomiya is from the Shinomiya Group, rival of the Suzuki Group. Sanzanin belongs to the Sanzanin Group, the one that stirred up trouble a while ago. Didn't the rumors say they tried to wipe out the Shinomiya Group? Conan's mind was spinning. From just the surnames? Shinomiya, Sanzanin, and Seijinomiya. He quickly figured out which Zaibatsu stood behind them. They were all colossal corporations. So how did all these elite heiresses end up at Titan High School? This question puzzled him deeply. Back when he was at Titan High, he had never seen any heiresses of this level transfer in. How had things changed so much in the short time he'd been away? Oh. As expected of the second Shinichi. Conan, naturally, wasn't laughing. Facing her gaze, sharp and unmistakably aimed at him, he could only grit his teeth and step forward. Sister Ran, I'm Edagawa Conan. Not Shinichi. That's true. Ran's eyes remained cold, until her lips curved into a smile. Edagawa Conan. Yes, that's right. It's Edagawa Conan. Conan, hearing his own name being spoken, felt strangely hollow inside. He could clearly sense that something incredibly important had just vanished, as if it had been lost forever. Kogoro, noticing the subtle change in his daughter's mood, immediately changed the subject. Ran, when did all these young ladies start transferring to Titan High? I thought girls like that would all be attending exclusive academies. His shift in topic worked, Ran's attention moved on. Well, Sanzanin and Seijinomiya used to attend Hikuo. Hikuo? Hiss. Kogoro took a sharp breath. Hikuo was a top-class elite academy, well known even among aristocratic schools. As for Shinomiya, she studied at Shuchen before. That's another elite school. Kogoro widened his eyes further. So he was right, all of these girls originally came from high society schools. But that only raised a new question. Why would these elite heiresses transfer from prestigious private schools to a public high school like Titan? Chapter 189, The Hope of the Hiramoto Clan's Comeback. After leaving the security room, Hayasaka made her way to the cruise ship's main hall. She didn't have much personal opinion about the people on board, but she had just finished transferring intel related to the Yamamoto clan. The current situation was becoming complicated, and she could no longer keep things under control on her own. She needed someone capable of stabilizing the situation. Amamiya-san. Her conservative black and white Victorian-style maid outfit was eye-catching as always. Her appearance instantly drew a lot of attention. But Hayasaka paid it no mind. Ren gave a slight nod, then activated his spiritual vision to assess Hayasaka's condition. Her spiritual body still showed clear signs of weakness, though there were no major abnormalities beyond that. Your mental state hasn't fully recovered. The collapse of the alternate dimension heavily impacted your spirit. For the time being, you shouldn't use that ability again. I understand. Hayasaka nodded slightly. She had already experienced firsthand the backlash of forcefully opening a door. How's Shinomiya? Miss Kaguya is awake, but her consciousness is still hazy? Hayasaka nodded again. Ren understood. Kaguya's condition was similar to Hayasaka's, but she had released even more power. It was natural her situation was worse. This was my fault too. Ren let out a sigh. I pushed her to release as much power as possible, to help her find her limits. I didn't expect it would lead to the collapse of the alternate dimension. I should have warned her beforehand. This isn't your fault, Amamiya. Hayasaka shook her head gently. She didn't believe this sudden turn of events could be blamed on him. No one could have predicted something like this. But just as she said that, She paused. Indeed, normally, such an event couldn't be foreseen. But couldn't Ren use divination to glimpse future events? Amamiya. Didn't you divine this? Don't overestimate what divination can do. Ren shook his head slightly. Divination is useful, but you can't rely on it for everything. If you put too much faith in the future seen through divination, you'll become bound by that future. That's why I don't go around predicting things just for the sake of it. Divination had always been one of Ren's most important tools, but he also clearly understood the taboos that seers had to follow. Seeing how carefully Ren avoided certain details, Hayasaka could tell there were likely many unspoken taboos involved. Your condition still isn't fully recovered. Why did you come out? Hayasaka gave a small smile and nodded, but her gaze subtly shifted toward the Hatamoto clan. She had keenly noticed that many of the Hatamoto clan members were focused on her. Is it about the Hatamoto clan? Yes. What did you find out? Yes. Ren gave a light nod, then stood up and followed Hayasaka to the side. After they left the main hall and confirmed no one else was nearby, Ren asked, is there something wrong with the information we gathered? Yes. According to the intel from the Hayasaka family, it's confirmed that the future heir of the Hatamoto clan is Hatamoto Natsu, granddaughter of Hatamoto Gozo. The reason they're gathered here is to hold a ritual on the island where the Hatamoto clan's ancestral home is located. The ritual also doubles as the engagement ceremony for Hatamoto Natsu and her fiancé. If it were just an ordinary granddaughter, Hatamoto Gozo wouldn't go to such lengths to arrange an engagement right after a ritual. But because of how much importance he places on her, it's become this grand of an event. Ren nodded. He understood now why they had encountered the Hatamoto clan and how much Hatamoto Gozo, the clan elder, valued his granddaughter. So, your investigation points to a problem with Hatamoto Natsu's fiancé? Yes. Hatamoto Gozo. Was he the type to make a lot of enemies in the past? Yes. And Natsu's fiancé is the son of one of those enemies? Yes. Ren let out a speechless sigh. This is some real soap opera level drama. A textbook revenge story. I infiltrated the family of my enemy by getting close to his granddaughter, all to avenge my dead father. That clueless fiancé doesn't actually think his identity hasn't been exposed, does he? If even the Hayasaka family had uncovered it, Ren seriously doubted it was some well-guarded secret. Hayasaka I nodded silently. Ren found this kind of naive person irritating and pulled out his tarot cards to divine the outcome of the return trip. He drew the reversed High Priestess, the reversed Magician, and the upright Death card. Ren completed the divination. Looks like it's going to be troublesome. Even he had to sigh at the final result. Though he enjoyed watching drama unfold, this kind of drama really didn't belong during his vacation. Even if he wanted to spectate, he preferred better timing. He looked at the Death card in his hand, a skeletal figure wrapped in a cloak, wielding a black scythe. This time, the god of death would definitely swing that scythe. Amamiya, are you not going to stop it? Do you think they'll listen? With that one line, Amamiya put an end to Hayasaka's suggestion. It wasn't that Ren intended to turn a blind eye, but some people just wouldn't listen. Hayasaka, since they wanted to play, and dragged Shinamiya into it, they should be ready to pay the price. The Hatamoto clan's situation isn't looking good. Yes. Hayasaka nodded. The Hatamoto clan acquired a valuable piece of real estate through shady dealings with the Takasugi group. It's now confirmed that the government plans to designate that area for a new airport. The land value in the surrounding region is expected to skyrocket. Ren wasn't surprised by that information. Major conglomerates always had inside knowledge of government policies. Otherwise, how else could certain officials maintain their lifestyles? But because of that land, the Hatamoto clan has been tightening its funds. They've sold off a lot of assets to stay afloat. They're staking everything on that land. From Hayasaka's summary, Ren could tell that this real estate was the Hatamoto clan's last chance at a comeback. Then Hayasaka spread the word that the land's value is about to skyrocket. I'm sure plenty of conglomerates will want a piece of the action. Chapter 190, Giving the Right to Choose. Hayasaka nodded slightly. It was a standard move. Expose the situation early to prevent disaster. Once news of the land's appreciation spreads and draws the attention of various conglomerates, the government likely won't be able to carry out the original plan so easily. The Hatamoto clan is done for. Hayasaka was certain of it. She knew the Hatamoto family had staked everything on this one piece of land. They couldn't afford to lose. If this gamble failed, not only would the family's position as a conglomerate crumble, but they might even fall into an irreversible decline. But Hayasaka I had no interest in the future of the Hatamoto clan. Her only mission was to protect Kaguya. If the Hatamoto clan tried anything foolish during this return trip, she wouldn't hesitate to personally send out the order to annihilate them. Amamiya-san, are you really not going to warn them? Ren fell silent for a moment, collecting himself. I'd like to, but will they listen? Just thinking that they might not believe it is enough to discourage him from speaking up. But if even one person out of the whole bunch listened, maybe some things could change. Hayasaka, you've seen what the Hashimoto family is like. If I tell them the pillar of their family is going to die, do you think they'll set off fireworks to celebrate? Hayasaka, I believe that those who were purely profit-driven definitely would. Most large families didn't have anything resembling real familial affection. She knew this better than anyone. Because the Shinomiya family was just like that. Where is Natsu Hashimoto? She's Gozo Hashimoto's favorite granddaughter, right? Ren fell silent again, then turned to look at Hayasaka. Hayasaka, do you think I should tell her? I think it's worth a try. Hayasaka voiced her thoughts without hesitation. This is just like the nature of people you explained to us in the beginning, Amamiya-san. Ren was briefly taken aback, then smiled. Human nature. He had just been talking about it, and now the words were being turned back on him. Hey. I've really been taught a lesson. But you're right, Hayasaka-san. I taught you well, and it really would be hypocritical of me not to act on it myself. Besides, this entire story revolves around human nature. Maybe this is a good test before I move up. Respect people's right to choose, which means we have to give them the right to make that choice. Forget the others. Just one person is enough. Giving her the right to choose is enough. But doesn't that make me the bad guy? Yes. From her perspective, you'll be an awful, terrible villain. Hayasaka-i's response made Ren smile even wider. Ah. I'm a social recluse, so being disliked really bothers me. But it's fine. Even if he ended up being the bad guy, it would still be a fresh experience. Let's wait and see how the news plays out. Understood. Hayasaka crossed her hands in front of her abdomen and gave a polite bow. I know of a quiet room that's perfect for a conversation. Alright. Thanks, Hayasaka-san. No problem. The room Hayasaka mentioned was indeed very quiet. It was more like a private lounge, with a table, some tea, and a large bed. The doors were specially made with excellent soundproofing. It was pretty obvious what this room was usually used for. Ren glanced around helplessly. Does this room really look appropriate for the situation? Hayasaka, are you seriously planning to make Shinomiya faint in this kind of room? She wouldn't faint anymore. Ren had built up more tolerance, but she'd definitely be too embarrassed to say a word. Fortunately, for now, it was just being used as a conversation room. Knock knock knock. A few moments after the knock, the door opened. Come in. Hayasaka entered first, followed by Natsu Hashimoto. She wore a light, ocean blue dress. It wasn't particularly eye-catching, but Amamiya Ren's sharp eyes noticed it was probably custom-made. Excuse me, what did you want to speak with me about? Natsu Hashimoto looked confused and uneasy at being called here alone, especially after noticing the bed in the room. Ren noticed her gaze and waved his hand casually. Hayasaka, don't leave. I don't want Miss Hashimoto thinking I'm going to do something to her. Understood. Amamiya-san, you're exactly right. That's not what I meant. Just that one comment was enough to expose Natsu Hashimoto's frail and helpless demeanor, giving Amamiya Ren a headache as he glanced at Hayasaka. Things were complicated enough, and this girl had to make everything more tense. Miss Hashimoto, please have a seat. To be honest, I'm not sure you'll believe what I'm about to tell you. That sentence piqued Natsu Hashimoto's curiosity. Would she believe it? Driven by curiosity, she couldn't help but ask, may I ask? What's going on with my grandfather? Ren looked deeply at her, then got straight to the point. It's about your grandfather. He's already set foot on the road to death. Natsu Hashimoto's expression changed. She froze on the spot, panic written all over her face. But in addition to the fear, she grew more suspicious of the boy in front of her. Her guard rising beyond just surface-level wariness. Wait. How do you know something's happened to my grandfather? Ren expected this reaction. Of course, I learned about your grandfather through certain means. Then, he pointed at Hayasaka behind him. The maid behind you is actually a top-tier lady. Her status is far above yours. Also, this ship is Shinomiya's. Do you really think we'd let your group on board without investigating everything thoroughly? That explanation was enough to make Natsu Hashimoto slightly more convinced. Not because she trusted him, but because her grandfather had explained to her before that the Shinomiya family represented wealth and power. They had no reason to target the Hashimoto family, they weren't even in the same league. And if they said they'd investigated everything, it made sense. She didn't believe the Shinomiya family would ever allow unvetted guests on board. Chapter 191, Trust Me in return. After calming down, Natsu Hashimoto looked once more at the boy in front of her. Sir, what exactly did you mean by what you just said? Ren. Just call me Ren. Not knowing his name would make things awkward, so Ren gave it without hesitation. As for what I said earlier, The meaning is pretty straightforward, just take it literally. Seeing that he wasn't going to elaborate, Natsu Hitamoto grew more anxious. Please, explain in detail. Miss Natsu Hitamoto, are you aware of your family's current situation? Natsu was a little taken aback by the sudden question but still gave a slight nod. I know. Grandpa told me a bit about the Hitamoto family before. Right now, we've hit a dead end. He's been working hard to find a way to turn things around. Lately, Grandpa's mood has been pretty good. He told me he found a way to reverse the Hitamoto family's decline. Ren nodded slightly. It seemed Miss Hitamoto had indeed been told the truth, at least enough to understand the stakes. It's true. Your family found a potential breakthrough, through the adopted son of the Takasugi conglomerate. Speaking of the Takasugi conglomerate, Ren had nearly forgotten about that already fading name, if not for the Hitamoto family surfacing today. The last time it came up was during the wedding of Ran and Sanoko's elementary school teacher. In order to quickly increase liquidity, your family has been aggressively liquidating assets recently. Even some items that were once considered important to the family have been sold. If your grandfather continues to operate like this, I believe he does have a real chance of turning things around. But only if he's still alive by the time this entire plan is completed. Natsu's heart clenched. So in the end, this still came down to Grandpa's safety. Having lost her parents, she couldn't accept the idea of losing another loved one, especially not her grandfather, the one person she still regarded as true family. Is someone trying to harm Grandpa because of this? Ren waved it off. Not exactly. Your grandfather's been good at keeping it secret. Thankfully, the rest of your family isn't too sharp, they haven't picked up on the Hitamoto family's recent situation. The problem lies with your engagement. My engagement? Could it be Takehiko? Natsu's expression shifted. She couldn't imagine doing anything to hurt Grandpa, so the only possibility was Takehiko? Ren didn't answer directly but instead looked to Hayasaka. Hayasaka, I gave a slight bow. Miss Hitamoto, based on our investigation, your fiancé's father is named Ski. Ski. Hearing the surname, Natsu frowned. It sounded familiar, she felt like Grandpa had mentioned it before, but in what context? Hayasaka hadn't expected her to remember, it had happened quite a while ago. Ski was once a company president. Due to mismanagement and crushing debt, he ultimately committed suicide. His son's name is Ski Takehiko. He changed his family registry a few years ago and took the name Nakahara Takeshi. When she heard the name Nakahara Takeshi, Natsu froze. Then slowly, she lowered her head. I see. She looked like a balloon that had been punctured. After learning the truth, she finally understood why Grandpa had mentioned someone named Ski. So that was his way of warning her about why Takehiko had been so persistent. Grandpa had known Takehiko's true identity all along. But for her sake, he never explained it outright. He even allowed her to get engaged to Takehiko. Because he knew, once she found out the truth, she'd definitely reject the engagement. Grandpa didn't want her to be put in that position, so he kept quiet. Now, Natsu finally understood why Grandpa's mood had been so unstable ever since the engagement. It was all because of Takehiko. So, it really is Takehiko? Natsu's previously fragile demeanor vanished, replaced by a rare firmness, as if she'd made up her mind. He's the root of it all, isn't he? She didn't say anything more but of course, it was Takehiko. One last question. Why are you telling me this? She had been planning to ask how he knew all this, but now it no longer mattered. Miss Hitamoto, try picturing your relatives. Natsu instinctively pictured them in her mind. Would they be saddened by the death of the person holding the reins of the Hitamoto conglomerate? Natsu tried very hard to think positively, but it didn't work. Her aunt and uncle would never be saddened by Grandpa's death. They might even be happy about it. The very thought made her heart ache. I respect the choices and fates of others. But Hayasaka reminded me, this is human nature. That's why I have the right to offer others a choice. Miss Hitamoto, you have the right to choose. After taking a deep breath, Natsu looked at him, her gaze filled with doubt. But why are you telling me this? What can I possibly give you in return? She couldn't understand what she had to offer in exchange. Ren simply smiled. If you really want to repay me, then believe in me. That confused her even more. Believe? In what? Some kind of ideology? Believe in a person. Miss Hitamoto, you've been here long enough. It's time for you to return. Hearing Ren's words, Natsu subconsciously nodded. If you've made a decision, be sure to stay close to your grandfather. And if you ever face something you can't overcome, maybe believing in the power of faith wouldn't be a bad choice either. The power of faith? Natsu didn't fully understand what he meant, but she gave a small nod anyway, silently taking his words to heart and locking them away in her memory. Chapter 192, Grandpa, I want to be willful for once. After sending Natsu Hachimoto out, Hayasaka closed the door and turned her attention back to Ren, who was still sitting in the room. Amamiya, are you planning to start a society? Of course not. Ren shook his head. He understood why Hayasaka had that kind of suspicion. I want her to believe in me because the power system I follow requires the faith of believers to act as an anchor, something to stabilize my humanity after ascending to a higher position. I possess special characteristics. I'm not sure whether the anchor of belief is truly necessary, but given my personality, I have no issue testing it out. Hayasaka understood why Ren was doing this. It was a form of preparation for what was to come. Amamiya, does Miss Hashimoto's fiancé harbor murderous intent? Yes. Just like Takasugi Toshihiko, this Takehiko is also pursuing her out of revenge. But sometimes, hatred can be diluted over time. Especially when you're looking at such a beautiful, kind-hearted girl, it's enough to shake that hatred. Ren's words helped Hayasaka understand that Takehiko had, in fact, lost his desire for revenge. If that's the case, then why mislead her? Mislead? No. I didn't mislead her. Ren took out a tarot card, the reversed lover's card. When you went to get help, I performed a divination on Miss Hashimoto's future. It wasn't too far ahead, just 3 months after her marriage. Her married life would be filled with boredom and arguments. She wouldn't even be able to resist temptation. While divination isn't absolutely accurate, it's generally reliable when based on personal context. Having said that, Ren put away the tarot cards. Her fiancé may have temporarily forgotten his hatred, but that doesn't mean he's let go of it. The moment it resurfaces, it'll strike their marriage like a thunderbolt. Because when it returns, all the dissatisfaction in their marriage will be projected onto her identity, as the daughter of the man he seeks revenge on. Ren held the Wheel of Fortune card between his fingers. Miss Hashimoto's prospects for marriage are grim, but her career luck is quite good. If she devotes herself to her career and cuts off the parasites in her family, she might be able to reclaim her ancestral glory piece by piece. No wonder. Hayasaka was surprised. So it wasn't the fiancé who had acted out, then why had Ren brought him up? After learning what Miss Hashimoto's future marriage could look like, Hayasaka finally understood why Ren had framed the discussion that way. In that kind of marriage, this path was indeed better for her. Let's go watch the drama unfold. Ren stood up, confident that something big was about to happen. Hayasaka, have the bodyguards keep an eye on the Hashimoto family. Make sure they don't stir up trouble. Also, assign 1 or 2 guards to live beside and across from Hashimoto Gozo's room. Make sure any disturbances can be immediately handled. As for evidence, there are plenty of surveillance cameras near the guest rooms on the cruise ship. Add more. Use high-definition, night vision-capable cameras that can clearly capture faces even in the dark. Hayasaka efficiently described the surveillance equipment and emphasized the night vision function. Very good. Ren gave her high praise. As expected of a professional maid, everything was handled perfectly. The two walked out of the private room and entered the main hall. The main hall was bustling with activity. After leaving the room, the gloomy-faced Natsu Hashimoto made her way to the main hall. At that moment, nearly all the Hashimoto clan members had gathered in the hall, naturally including Hashimoto Gozo. The first person Natsu spotted was Takeshi, but she didn't even spare a glance at her fiancé. Instead, she quickly walked over to her grandfather. Grandpa. Natsu. Hashimoto Gozo noticed that his granddaughter looked distraught and frowned. He remembered the maid had called her away earlier. But he also knew the maid's master was from the Shinomiya family, so he couldn't say anything rash. Grandpa. You've known for a long time, haven't you? Looking at him, Natsu felt tears welling in her eyes. Knew. For a long time? Gozo was stunned for a moment. Then, seeing his granddaughter on the verge of tears, he understood what she meant. He instinctively glanced at Takeshi. That glance didn't escape the notice of Natsu, who had been watching closely. There was no need to say anything more. The answer was clear. The urge to cry grew stronger, but Natsu still held back. Grandpa. I want to be willful just this once. Hashimoto Gozo could faintly guess what his precious granddaughter was trying to say. Natsu, things like this. You have to decide for yourself. I've already decided. This was the first time Natsu Hashimoto had ever made such a request of her grandfather. Everything that happened after this would be her willful decision. After saying that, she steeled herself and slowly walked up to Hashimoto Takeshi. Takeshi sensed something was wrong when she formally approached him, but he still stood up. Natsu? Facing the man before her, Natsu took a deep breath. Takeshi, our engagement has changed. Let's call it off. Her sudden declaration struck like a bolt from the blue. Takeshi instinctively tried to grab her hand, but she stepped back, avoiding his touch. That was when he realized, this wasn't a joke. Natsu, why? Why is this happening? Still unwilling to give up, Takeshi stared at her in disbelief. Clenching her teeth, Natsu replied, Tsukite Hiko. Do I really need to say that name before you'll let go? Tsukite Hiko. Takeshi froze, his face turning pale as he looked at her tear-filled eyes. At that moment, he knew. He knew why Natsu had cancelled the engagement. And he also knew, his identity had been exposed. Chapter 193, You Meets My Criteria for a Partner. The two who had just stepped out of the room happened to witness the whole scene, bloody drama and all. TSK. What a show. Ren watched the drama unfold with rare schadenfreude. Amamiya-kun, your image is falling apart. Sometimes I like watching drama too, especially when it doesn't involve murder cases. Hayasaka's reminder was promptly ignored as Ren smiled. He wasn't the kind of person who cared much about appearances anyway. In the past, he hardly talked in front of others, but he'd still talk to his TV and computer when he was alone. Watching Ren enjoying the show, Hayasaka shook her head slightly. Boys will be boys, after all. But honestly, she thought it wasn't bad for guys to laugh like this from time to time. As long as they weren't the type to torment people like Kaguya. So, she too watched the drama unfold. A revenge-driven young master falling in love with the daughter of his enemy. That kind of plot is entertaining no matter the setting. Yeah, no doubt. Ren nodded in agreement. This kind of melodrama was universally appealing. But if this were a drama series, the ending would feel rushed. The male lead fell too quickly, and the female lead's resolve shut down any chance of a twist. Hayasaka had to pull Ren back from overanalyzing the drama. Ren, Miss Natsu isn't a bird in a gilded cage like Shinomiya. She has freedom and she has boundaries. Family. Natsu lost her parents young. Her grandfather, Gozo Hachimoto, doted on her and became her everything. He is her bottom line. And once that bottom line's crossed, even a fiancé is no exception, especially now that she knows his intentions weren't pure. Ren gave a light nod. Yeah, following this narrative logic, once you know the fiancé is basically a time bomb for your grandpa, you'd cut ties without hesitation. Totally reasonable to break things off on the spot. So, Ren, who's the one trying to kill Gozo Hachimoto? Hayasaka was genuinely curious. Sure, they'd find out the truth later that night, but who watching a mystery doesn't want to guess it ahead of time? Besides Zaijo Takehiko and Miss Hachimoto, there's one other suspect in the Hachimoto family. One more? With a hint, Hayasaka mentally flipped through the family tree and locked onto a name. Itaro Hachimoto. Kind of gloomy, doesn't talk much, hair covering half his face. Looks just like you a month ago. Ren didn't even bother to deny it, he agreed. That probably was me back then. But my hair wasn't that long. Plus, I didn't have the same resources as him, and I definitely never confessed to my cousin. There's no way he actually likes her. He's just lusting after her. What a creep. Ren's harsh take on Ichiro made Hayasaka glance at him suspiciously. Amamiya, you and him have a lot in common. So you're not. That sentence brought Ren to a halt. Wait, I don't have a cousin. What if the target were Miss Kaguya, Sanogo, or Fujiwara? He imagined Kaguya, Sanogo, and Chika in his mind. And even a saint would have wavered. Ren wasn't a saint. Saying he wasn't tempted would be a flat-out lie. He wasn't some monk who cut himself off from all worldly desires, he didn't want to be incomplete either. Hey! Doesn't that mean you're greedy for my body too? A voice suddenly interrupted. Ren and Hayasaka both froze. They turned around to find Chika standing nearby, face flushed and hand over her mouth, clearly startled by what she'd just overheard. Ren stared at the blushing Chika. He hadn't expected her to suddenly appear like this. Fujiwara. How long have you been listening? Ren asked the crucial question. Hee. Chika gave a sweet giggle, cheek still rosy. Since I saw you and I-chan whispering. So. Basically, she heard most of it. Ren covered his face with his hands. It's fine. It's normal to overhear stuff like that. Seeing Ren cover his face, Chika thought she had upset him and quickly tried to explain. I hear people talking behind my back all the time, saying they're obsessed with my sister's body. Fujiwara Toyomi? The one who always wore crop tops? No doubt she had plenty of admirers. But still, Ren had to internally snark, a bunch of pervs ogling someone else's sister. Though to be fair, he wasn't exactly innocent either. He was all about face and figure too. Who was he to judge? Still. Who had the guts to talk like that in front of Chika? Curious, Ren asked, Fujiwara, who'd you hear that from? My dad. Yeah, that tracks. Ren instantly understood. Only a father would dare say something like that to his daughter, as a warning. A subtle way of saying, be careful. Men are all the same. Fujiwara, listen to your father. Aside from your dad, there aren't many decent men out there. Feeling awkward that his inner thoughts had slipped out, Ren still tried to caution her seriously. Nope. Chika still wore that bubbly smile. I think you are pretty interesting. You totally meet my criteria for a partner. Chapter 194, Long-lasting hatred is uncommon. At that moment, Ren was a little shocked. Even Hayasaka, standing beside him, was a little caught off guard by the sudden confession. Fujiwara-san, are you being serious? Of course I'm serious. Chika smiled sweetly. She wasn't the type to go with the flow, nor someone who would like a person simply because of power or status. I like people who work hard and keep pushing toward their goals, even if they're not particularly good at expressing themselves. Well, I know that sounds like a simple requirement, but in reality, it's not. At the very least, I have to actually meet someone like that. Her words were grounded in realism. She knew full well that, no matter her own preferences, her final choice would have to be someone more suitable, just like Kaguya's. Her father wouldn't allow anyone unqualified to get close to her. Just like with her sister. And within the scope of what her father permitted, she saw very few people who truly worked hard. Well, President Shirogane is one of them. But compared to Ren, President Shirogane still gets some support from his father. Ren, on the other hand, has no one backing him. He relied entirely on himself to succeed. Kaguya isn't the only one who's looked into that. I've done some digging too. And my father's investigation was even more thorough than I expected. As someone from an elite government family, it was actually easier for her to dig up that kind of information than it would be for a conglomerate heiress. So she knew exactly how hard Ren had worked before he revealed any of his current special qualities. That was true, grueling effort just to survive. She admired people like that. Raised in a wealthy household, she hadn't experienced any real hardships. She'd heard about families who struggled, sure, but Ren's situation had genuinely shocked her. Even Shirogane's family wasn't poor from the start. It was only later, when his family's company went bankrupt, that they truly fell into poverty. But Ren? He had started at rock bottom. No parents. No family. Just sheer will to support himself through school. Given that, she found his lack of social skills completely understandable. Who has time to socialize when you're that busy just trying to survive? So when she looked at a guy like Ren, who worked so hard, she realized she genuinely liked him. He fit her criteria for a partner completely. Then why not choose Shirogane? Hayasaka asked bluntly. Fujiwara rested her chin on her hand, thinking for a while, before answering. It's because of his face. President Shirogane's eyes look like my dog, Ps. I love Ps, but I can't like President Shirogane the same way I like Ps. And the other reason is probably just a feeling. It was vague, but that was the kind of answer girls often gave. Even Chika herself didn't really know how to describe it properly. After being in the student council together for a whole year, I still never got the urge to date President Shirogane. But I think I could with Amamiya. I think it's probably because of his face and mysterious vibe. That answer was surprisingly honest. Even Ren had to admit it was likely due to his looks and his aura of mystery that he earned extra points. So appearance and mystery really did hold a lot of weight. Even Ren found it hard to believe. But he wasn't about to complain. After all, this was his second life and it made sense that his genetic luck was better this time around. Aside from that and the diary that appeared when he was 15, he didn't have much going for him. Turns out it's pretty normal for both guys and girls to care about looks. At this point, shouldn't Ren be thanking the parents he never met for giving him these good genes and this face? Obviously. Chika nodded without hesitation. These days, people judge each other based on appearance first. Who would even bother to get to know someone without first seeing their face? But there are exceptions. Sometimes you get interested after learning about someone's character, and if the meeting goes well, then the looks just become a bonus. True. That was pretty accurate. In this day and age, you at least needed to pass the face check before anyone would try to understand your inner self. If you didn't meet the visual standard, people wouldn't even want to try. Even Ren had to admit, when it came to beautiful faces, he wanted to understand those girls better. Well, his standard for a cute girl was about a 6, but the girls around him? They were all 9s or above. Top tier. Hey. Fujiwara-san, why don't you go watch the big drama over there instead? Ren made a desperate attempt to shift the topic from love interests back to gossip. That was a very awkward transition. Chika smiled as she pointed it out, but she still followed along with the shift in topic. That scene was pretty intense, but things like that aren't all that rare in this country. Among the people I know, a lot of families connected to Shuchin students have bankrupted others in business deals. President Shirogane's family is just one example. When people go bankrupt, some can't handle the pressure and end up hanging themselves or jumping off buildings. And usually, behind those families, there's at least one person who harbors thoughts of revenge. But it's rare for anyone to actually go through with it. Because revenge that drags on for too long rarely holds up. She hadn't seen anything like that happen at Shechin or among the social circle she knew. That's true. Hatred that lasts more than 10 or 20 years is pretty rare. Ren agreed with her. But right now, something like that had happened. Twice. In a very short period of time. Well, I'm going to record it later. Chapter 195, the second batch of diaries issuance. I encountered 2 revenge scenarios in the same week. This hatred has lasted more than 10 years, maybe even over 20. Honestly, it's rare for hatred to persist this long, unless it's truly extreme. From what I've seen in the past, revenge doesn't usually take the form of joining the enemy's company and targeting someone else to get back at them. The Avengers I know would just pick up a knife and kill the person outright after waiting 10 or 20 years, so these 2 childhood revenge stories I've encountered recently. They feel more like something straight out of a Japanese drama, and falling for the enemy's daughter? Is the enemy's daughter really that attractive? I get wanting revenge on your enemy, but why do they always target the enemy's daughter or granddaughter while they're at it? These so-called Avengers don't seem like they're here for revenge. They're here for romance. I just heard from Fujiwara that lots of families connected to Shechin end up going at each other's throats. But actual Avengers are rare. Why have 2 popped up recently? I think it might be because Becca City's mystery quotient is off the charts. Everyone here is a high IQ criminal, according to the insight from the seer and my current understanding of the situation. The cause of this case really does point to the groom, but overall, Miss Hatamoto herself has an exceptional character. The saying that beautiful women bring trouble really holds true, however, this time, the focus isn't on the criminal, but Miss Hatamoto herself. Hayasaka reminded me, it's a question of human nature. I think so too, which is why I gave Miss Hatamoto the right to choose. I don't know if she truly changed her fate through her own strength, or if it was just her belief in me that altered the seer's reading. When Ren wrote the final stroke and decided to end today's diary, a line of text suddenly appeared at the bottom. Diary to be distributed. Seeing this line, Ren was silent for a moment, then waited for the knock at the door. Knock knock knock. Sure enough, the knock came. Ren walked over and opened the door. As expected, the person outside was Sanoko. It was Sanoko. Since it was nighttime, her hair was still a little damp, and droplets of water dotted her shoulders. She must have come straight here right after her shower without even drying her hair. She was smiling brighter than usual. She brought her hands out from behind her back, holding a diary in them. I've got it too, the diary. Should I say congratulations? Sanoko smiled and tucked her hands behind her back again, taking 2 confident steps forward. Ren instinctively took 2 steps back. I should be the one congratulating you. You haven't forgotten our agreement, right? That we'd start dating once you got the diary. Yeah, I haven't forgotten. Hearing that, Sanoko's smile deepened. Then that means we can fulfill our agreement today. Sanoko. Are you sure? Are you serious? Of course I'm serious. Seeing Ren's expression grow more serious, Sanoko also softened her smile. She had always been serious about this decision. I've been serious from the very beginning. It's just that the diary took a while to arrive. That made me slower than the big ice cube. That was her one real regret. She'd expected to get hers sooner, but the diary didn't fall into her hands until nighttime. Even though she'd rushed over to Ren's room right away, the feeling of being one step too late still left her a little bitter. There's no way to prioritize something like this. Ren was starting to choose his words more carefully. After all, it was him that Shinomiya had confessed to earlier. That confession had been interrupted midway, but it wasn't because she failed. It was more like it hadn't reached the finish line yet. Normally, you can't compare confessions like that. But our situation's kind of unique. Sanoko couldn't really accept Shinomiya's confession either, since their circumstances were anything but ordinary. After all, how many people in the world are connected through these diaries? That alone made their relationship special, something beyond common sense. Just like you said in the beginning, our fates are intertwined. So even if something changes between us, that's only natural. Of course, that doesn't mean I won't be jealous of you and the Ice Queen. Understanding is one thing. Jealousy is another. Those feelings don't cancel each other out. Any girl in love wants to have her person all to herself. Sanoko was no exception. Unfortunately, the boy she liked was just a little too special. So special that she couldn't act possessive. That was her second regret. So, I want to fulfill the promise we made back then. That was practically a confession. And for that promise, Ren had no intention of going back on his word. If that's the case, then let's try dating. Yeah. Hearing his answer, Sanoko visibly relaxed. She took a step forward and leaned into Ren's arms. As for Ren's awkwardness when it came to girls, she could take care of that in time. She believed that now that they were officially dating, things would gradually improve. Right now, Sanoko just hoped Ren wouldn't get too good at dealing with girls in the future. But that was a problem for later. By the way, you'd better give the Ice Queen a proper response. That girl's confession must have taken everything she had. If it hadn't been you, she would have never gone through with it. Of course, Ren didn't need a reminder. He'd already planned to handle that. Especially considering how much Shinomiya had said. There was no way he could just leave her hanging. Chapter 196, Ladies' Rights. Looking down at Sanoko, who was still burying her face in her arms, Ren didn't know what to say in that moment and subconsciously changed the subject. Sanoko, did you read the diary's contents? Yeah. So, did you draw your first lottery? Sanoko froze for a moment, then pulled away from Ren's arms and scratched her face a little awkwardly. I just read through it and forgot that part. She had gotten so excited reading the diary that she rushed to Ren right after finishing the first entry, completely forgetting the most important step. Wait, I'll draw a prize now and see what I get. Sanoko was actually looking forward to this part. She didn't know what kind of power her trait might grant her. She took out the diary, selected the lottery option, and summoned the large roulette wheel. The spinning wheel gradually came to a stop, and the pointer landed on a section. Nejima. Magister Negi Magi, you have obtained the provisional contract coin. Provisional contract coin. Drop the coin to form a special magic circle. Within the circle, a provisional contract can be formed. Note, a kiss is required to complete the ritual. Staring at the coin in her hand, Sanoko looked a bit puzzled. It wasn't a direct ability, but rather a tool for forming a contract. She glanced at Ren. Needless to say, the contract target was obvious. And since the ritual required a kiss, there was no way she'd use it with anyone other than Ren. Which meant the prop had limited use. But a smile gradually formed on her face. Even if it wasn't a direct manifestation of power, she didn't really mind. She wasn't entirely sure what a contract entailed, but she liked the idea of the ritual. Coincidentally, today was a memorable day too. And this time, she was sure she'd be one step ahead of the others. With that thought in mind, Sanoko smiled and looked up at Ren, who was a head taller than her. Ren, let's form a contract? Just as Ren was confused, he saw Sanoko toss the item she had drawn to the floor. Ding! With a crisp sound, the coin hit the ground and disappeared almost instantly, replaced by a magic circle large enough to cover the two of them. Pink light radiated from the circle, and within it, both of them could feel each other's heartbeats quicken, along with a blush and a faint, special kind of tension. Ren. The comforting sensation caused a soft flush to rise on Sanoko's cute face. She knew Ren wouldn't have the courage to make the first move, so she grabbed the front of his shirt, pulled him down, and seized the moment. Smooch. The instant their lips met, the magic circle burst with brilliant light, slowly materializing a card with Sanoko's image on it. As the contract card took form, the magic circle gradually faded. But the two, now having kissed, didn't immediately separate. Only after a long pause did they pull apart in unspoken understanding. Both of their faces were bright red. This had been their first kiss. Sanoko picked up the card at her feet and turned it over. The image on the front showed her in a blue evening gown, the usual headband gone, her appearance transformed into that of a true lady. Words were written above the card, contract card, ladies' rights, allows a user to meet with anyone at any time without an appointment. Upon seeing this, Sanoko instantly understood what kind of ability she had received. It really suits my status as a young lady. Although it wasn't as direct as Ran's or Yukiko's abilities, this kind of power had strong utility. Of course, the power itself wasn't the main thing, it was the commemorative value that mattered. Looking up at Ren, she smiled and held the card to her lips. To commemorate our first day of dating, now you'll never be able to forget me. Ren stared at Sanoko, dazed. I really can't forget you. He wasn't the type to say mushy things, but Ren truly felt that it was impossible to forget Sanoko now. She left a strong impression on him since the beginning, and now, with his contract kiss, there was no way she could be erased from his memory. Sanoko smiled as the warmth on her face slowly deepened. It had been a spur-of-the-moment decision, but now that things had calmed down, she realized just how bold it was, definitely more daring than that icy block. Well, that's all for today. I'm going back to my room. She left in a bit of a hurry. Looking at the closed door, the heat in Ren's face finally began to fade. Just as he was about to splash some water on his face, he noticed another card lying on the ground. He picked it up. Some words were written on it. Main card, the central card of a provisional contract. Used for contact, summoning, and magic supply to the contracted servant, provisional contract. Ren glanced at the ability written on the card. It really does suit her. By the way, Is this a copy of Asuna Kagorazaka and Ayaka Yukihiro from the Nejima Magister Negi Magi universe? Shaking his head slightly, he stored the main card inside Sefirah Castle. Since they were always together anyway, the card wasn't especially useful at the moment, though it could be useful later, maybe for magic supply during research. But that was for the future, not now. Knock knock knock. There was another knock at the closed door. After mentally preparing himself, Ren opened it. The person standing outside surprised him. It was Fujiwara Chika. Fujiwara-san? Chika stood there in a white nightgown, her ample bust lifting the fabric and making her natural figure all the more noticeable. It was just a plain nightgown, but on her, it looked subtly seductive. Ren, I want to talk to you. As she spoke, Chika pulled out a diary hidden behind her back. It seemed like whoever was distributing the diaries had indeed limited it to this small group. Not only had Sanoko gotten one, but so had Fujiwara. Ren nodded slightly and stepped aside. Come in. Chapter 197, Fujiwara is indeed quite suitable. After entering the room, Chika didn't treat it as a boy's room at all. Instead, she acted like it was her own space. She sat down on the single sofa, made herself a cup of tea, and took a sip of the steaming drink. It's so hot. The tea was boiling, and she had taken an impatient sip. Or rather, she wasn't suited for drinking scalding hot tea in the first place. Did you burn yourself? Ren walked over and looked at Chika's reddened lips, clearly aware of how much damage the tea's temperature had caused her. Chika's eyes welled up with tears as she fanned her mouth rapidly with her hands and nodded frantically. Don't move. Ren shook his head. She was unexpectedly reckless. Then he reached out and tapped her lips lightly. Secret. As soon as Ren spoke, the burning sensation around Chika's mouth suddenly vanished. Ah. That's better. The scorching pain faded, replaced by a cool, soothing sensation. Chika felt immediate relief. Be more careful when drinking next time. If you're not used to hot tea, don't force it. There are cool drinks in the fridge. No, drinking cold tea late at night can cause a stomachache, especially this season. Chika picked up the cup of hot tea again, but this time, she was obviously more cautious. She blew on it gently and only took a small sip once it had cooled slightly. The lukewarm temperature was much more pleasant. Ren sat across from her. So, is this about the diary? Or the reward? The reward, Chika replied directly. I've heard Kaguya talk about the diary a lot, and you guys don't really avoid me when you bring it up, so I know the basics. What I don't understand is the reward I got from the lottery. I'd like your help to figure it out. No problem. It was just identifying a reward item he didn't recognize. Not a big deal for him. Ren waved his hand casually and asked, Fujiwara, what was the name of your roulette draw? Lord of Mysteries. Chika's straightforward answer made him freeze just as he was about to retract his hand. He looked at her with a slight smile. This is really... He tried to keep a straight face. Besides him, someone else had drawn from the Lord of Mysteries. That was a bit unexpected. Was it a potion? Yeah. What sequence? I think it was a potion called Spectator. That response made Ren take a closer look at her. But honestly, it really suits you, Chika. For anyone else, the Spectator potion wouldn't be a good match. But for Chika, it oddly fit. The potion pathway granted excellent abilities, but the side effects were also significant. Unlike Ren, who had drawn wild card at the start and thus became unique, almost immune to the usual side effects, Chika didn't have that kind of buffer. Still, Ren began explaining the audience potion's powers. Fujiwara, let me explain the potion you drew. Spectator. Drinking the Spectator potion grants you extraordinary abilities. It enhances your spirit and observation skills. You'll be able to discern others' intentions and thoughts just by observing their behavior. Isn't that basically mind reading? For the first time, Chika felt just how close supernatural power really was and how strong this ability sounded. If it were her mother, she'd be ecstatic to get something like this. It's not quite mind reading. You're making inferences based on what you observe. The potion just enhances your observation skills to the extreme. But the pathway you drew, the visionary pathway, eventually develops into reading people's hearts. The next potion down the line, Sequence 8, should be telepathist. It further strengthens the observation abilities you gained from Spectator, and also allows you to perceive auras. At that point, maybe you really can read people's minds. Even Shinomiya and Ran probably wouldn't be able to block that. Magic nullification only works against supernatural powers. But when it comes to observation, there's really no way to defend. After all, mind reading through the visionary pathway works via observation. External, internal, and mystical cues. It's fundamentally an extension of one's own perception, not some overpowered forced mind reading like the diary's cheat ability. Observation can't be nullified by anti-magic. Of course, Ren also made one thing clear. Just keep in mind, it's only observation. Other than that, you don't get anything else. Neither spectator nor telepathist offer any boost to direct combat ability. That's important. Chika nodded slightly. She understood what Ren was saying. Even though the spectator path didn't give her something flashy like Kaguya's abilities, she still felt like it was a perfect match. Compared to Kaguya's direct power, she believed she was better suited for a supporting role. Mental acuity and observation were her strengths. Amamiya, I think the spectator potion really does suit me. In a sense, Ren also felt the same, it really did suit Chika. If you're okay with that, then I'll explain how the potion system works. Okay. Although the potion system looks impressive, it comes with certain risks. Once you start taking potions, there's always the danger of losing control. Losing control? The phrase sounded dangerous, and Chika's expression turned serious. Well, Ren, I don't really get what that means. I just want to know, can it be controlled? Yes. Managing loss of control wasn't that difficult. What losing control really referred to was encountering trouble during promotion, or being exposed to information beyond what your mind can handle. Most Lord of Mysteries pathway users lost control when they heard the whispers of high-sequence beings during advancement, or when they accessed too much forbidden knowledge and suffered cognitive pollution. Damage taken during high-sequence battles could also trigger it, but that was something still far off for Chika. Then there were curses. But none of this was particularly stressful for Ren, who held both Sefirah Castle and access to the River of Eternal Darkness. When you drink the potion, you can chant my name and turn that into faith in me. I can protect you. Chapter 198, Loss of Control. Just drink it and chant Amamiya's name, right? Chika confirmed one last time. Right. At the moment of confirmation, Chika made her final decision. She took the potion bottle from her pocket, uncorked it, and drank it down in one go. In an instant, her vision burst into color, and the entire world around her began to spin. She didn't even realize a strange sound had escaped her lips, nor did she notice the faint pink scales that had started appearing on her skin. Strange. Why such a big reaction to a low-sequence potion? Observing Chika's changes, Ren was genuinely surprised. A potion of the lowest sequence shouldn't cause such a strong reaction. This wasn't a fully mysterious world, there were no high sequences here. There shouldn't be any high sequence whispers either. So why such a violent reaction? Without hesitation, Ren acted. An invisible fog instantly enveloped Fujiwara, completely suppressing the signs of losing control that had started manifesting. Once the symptoms subsided, Ren heard a faint prayer. Amamiya. Amamiya. The voice was soft, but clearly Fujiwara's. Seems like the loss of control was quite serious for a lowest sequence potion. Ren muttered, puzzled, then closed his eyes and focused his consciousness into Sefirah Castle. Beside the ancient stone table sat a pink-haired girl. Fujiwara had been drawn into Sefirah Castle through her prayer. Ah! The girl lying on the table looked like a student jolted awake during class. Her face was flushed, her heart raced, and she was panting heavily, as if she had just awoken from a nightmare. She immediately searched for him and soon spotted the figure standing by the stone table. Amamiya. She leapt at him without hesitation. The moment she did, her emotions burst forth uncontrollably. The world. It was twisted. I heard so many strange voices. I felt. The world was collapsing around her. She was in terrible condition. It felt like she had glimpsed a madman's world firsthand. In that twisted reality, she too felt as if she would be consumed by madness at any moment. If she hadn't called out Amamiya's name in time, she felt she might never have seen him again. It's okay now, it's okay. It's all over. Seeing Chika on the verge of breaking down, Ren could tell just how severe her loss of control had been. If he hadn't used Sefirah Castle to suppress it, she would have turned into a monster in less than 30 seconds. Using the Soul Assurer's extraordinary ability, he gently comforted her and stroked her hair to calm her. Ren also examined her spiritual condition using his spiritual vision. Had the corruption faded? The black ink-like corruption on Fujiwara's spirit body was visibly dissipating before his eyes. Corruption. Could it fade this easily? Even without having seen all the Lords of Mysteries, Ren knew that corruption wasn't something that just vanished on its own. This was unusual. As he watched the corruption vanish entirely from Chika's spirit body, he felt a bit unsettled. He hadn't used the full power of Sefirah Castle, not even the River of Eternal Darkness. So how had the corruption faded? Ren carefully examined Chika's spirit body, ether body, mental body, and astral body again, yet found no remaining contamination. It really was odd. A low-sequence potion should not have had such intense side effects. This wasn't the world of Adam. Even Adam from that world wouldn't trigger something like this. Not only had she nearly lost control, but she'd also been exposed to corruption. And yet the corruption had vanished on its own. Ren made a mental note. This was something he'd need to monitor closely moving forward. He was apparently quite special, as he had never experienced anything like this himself. He'd never once encountered loss of control, let alone corruption. It looked like he'd need to personally watch over Chica during her future advancements. To prevent any future losses of control or corruption, it was now necessary for him to be present. Please. I don't want Grandpa to die. I don't want Grandpa to die. Suddenly, a prayer echoed in his ears. A red star slowly descended from the endless fog above. While soothing Chica, Ren guided the star before him. The red star shimmered with a projected scene. A gloomy young man was about to stab an old man in the abdomen. A girl dashed toward the old man, her expression filled with desperation, praying with everything she had. Looks like the opportunity had arrived. Then, in response to that prayer, a corresponding power would be granted, to change fate. A power to temporarily alter the destiny of the one who prayed was granted in the form of a gift. After completing the gift, he looked down at the still crying Chica and sighed helplessly. It was going to take a while to calm her down. But there was no helping it. After all, for an ordinary girl to go through loss of control and encounter spiritual corruption, emotional instability was inevitable. By the way, could he pull Hayasaka into Sefirah Castle too? Just as Ren was thinking that, a red star fell from the foggy ceiling. Ren peered into the star and saw Hayasaka reading a diary. So it was possible, then. But it seemed the diary itself was what allowed her location to be locked. He gently tapped the star. Hayasaka, the net has closed in on the Hitamoto side. I've got something going on here and can't leave right now. Go check it out first, I'll join you later. Hayasaka, visible through the star, was momentarily stunned. But she quickly sprang into action. Seeing this, Ren didn't continue watching. Instead, he focused his attention on comforting Chica, who was still quietly crying. Chapter 199, The Elderly's Thoughts 15 minutes ago. Since this was a private luxury cruise ship, there were no so-called tourist rooms. Every room was lavishly furnished and well-equipped. As a guest of the cruise, Hayasaka arranged rooms for everyone. Hatamoto Gozo, who had a hot temper, was given a room to himself, far removed from the others. It wasn't easy to get close to his room. The rest of the Hatamoto family were placed in one area, though divided into different rooms based on whether they were married. Of course, Tsukite Hiko, who had only recently become part of the Hatamoto family, had his room assigned separately. After all, the engagement with the second daughter of the Hatamoto family had been unilaterally cancelled. Naturally, he no longer had the qualifications. In addition, his true identity had been exposed, leaving no further prospects. The possibility of marrying Hatamoto Natsu was virtually destroyed. Once they disembarked from the ship, they would belong to completely different worlds. As for Hatamoto Natsu, she wasn't placed in the same area as the rest of the Hatamoto family but was given a room next to Hatamoto Gozo's. Because the engagement had been cancelled, still, even though a room had been assigned to her, Natsu remained in her grandfather's room. Even Hatamoto Gozo found it odd. Natsu, why aren't you resting in your own room? Having just experienced the cancellation of her engagement, she should have been exhausted. In truth, Hatamoto Gozo hadn't wanted her to find out about it. But things hadn't gone as planned. In the end, his beloved granddaughter was left deeply saddened. Grandpa. Even though she was upset by the broken engagement, Natsu still felt uneasy. Especially when she recalled the last words left by that boy, remember to stay by the old man's side. She vaguely sensed that this was both a reminder and a warning. Natsu instinctively felt that she shouldn't leave her grandfather's side today. Otherwise, he might still be in danger. Hugging her knees tightly, Natsu chose not to share those words. I just feel like today won't be very peaceful. It's quieter with you here, Grandpa. Hatamoto Gozo could tell she was hiding something. He also knew exactly when her attitude had shifted. It was after she was summoned away by the Shinomiya family's maid. Natsu, did the Shinomiya maid tell you something about Takehiko? Yes. Though, maybe not directly. Explain it in detail. With nothing better to do, Gozo became interested in the topic. Natsu gave a slight nod. The maid who asked me to talk was named Hayasaka, but she didn't take me to see Miss Shinomiya. Instead, she took me to meet a boy. Although the boy didn't give his name, the maid was very respectful toward him and cooperated with him. She explained things when he told her to. Hatamoto Gozo nodded slightly. He could tell the boy wasn't ordinary. Among the group of young ladies, that boy had stood out. As a businessman, he had a general impression of many young elites. It was taboo to accidentally offend someone important without knowing it. So when they had met earlier, Gozo had recognized most of the girls. In addition, among Kogro's group of girls, that boy had been the only one he couldn't identify. He stood out. Abrupt and striking. But there was something indescribably strange about him. Still, knowing that he couldn't possibly recognize everyone, Gozo had dismissed the odd feeling. Now, hearing things from his granddaughter's perspective, it confirmed the boy's status wasn't low. The maid told me about Takehiko. Also, she mentioned some things about what you've been planning lately, Grandpa. Gozo wasn't surprised. Those idiots in the family might not know about his fund recovery efforts, but it didn't mean others couldn't find out. The Shinomiya family's intelligence network really is broad. They even investigated our Hitamoto conglomerate, despite it being in decline. Gozo honestly admired such information control. If only the Hitamoto family had those kinds of resources, perhaps their situation would have turned around long ago. What the boy said was accurate. I recently got some very good intel. If things go well, we might just reverse the Hitamoto family's decline. Hitamoto Gozo was very confident in this. The current problem with the Hitamoto conglomerate was liquidity. As a major business group, they still own many heavy assets, but these couldn't be liquidated easily. They also had many long-term operations. Still, the conglomerate needed a steady cash flow to function. That's where the Hitamoto Zaibatsu was faltering. So, after getting this piece of information, Gozo had begun to make moves, selling off many major assets. It was a gamble. Maybe he could win a brighter future for his beloved granddaughter. Thinking of that, Hitamoto Gozo looked at her with the warmth of an ordinary grandfather. Natsu, I've made my decision. From now on, the Hitamoto family will be yours alone. Grandpa. You don't need to worry about your uncles. They're all parasites, clinging to the Hitamoto name. Your aunt, I knew what kind of person she was, so I let her marry a competent man who still wasn't good enough. Your sister's a tramp. Back in school, she was fooling around with men and women alike. She's the kind of trash anyone can ride. She doesn't deserve to sit at the same table as you. I let her marry a gangster because that's all she's worth. As for your uncle, that guy's useless. He likes cooking and opened a restaurant, but it went under due to his incompetence. He is half-baked and aimless. How could he manage a restaurant? He'll come crawling back for money. He is no good. At this moment, Hitamoto Gozo harshly criticized his children, but more than anything, there was a strong sense of disappointment behind his words. He knew exactly what kind of people they were. That's why he'd already decided. Not a single yen from the Hitamoto family would go to those leeches. Everything would go to you. I originally allowed your engagement to that boy because he had potential. At least he could support you in the future. His revenge wasn't aimed at you. He wasn't just targeting you. The old man could see clearer than anyone. If he hadn't known what kind of person the boy truly was, how could he have allowed his precious granddaughter to be engaged to him? Grandpa. At that moment, Natsu's eyes grew misty. Hearing his words, she understood his plan. Grandpa had already prepared himself to become a target of revenge. Chapter 200, Please give me the power to change my grandfather's fate. Hitamoto Gozo had already used himself as bait to help his precious granddaughter completely seize control of the Hitamoto family. But what he hadn't expected was that his granddaughter had her own plans. She had directly cancelled the engagement with Takehiko. This was truly beyond his expectations. Still, there was nothing he could do. Some things had already been explained in advance. Even so, Gozo Hitamoto remained deeply surprised. The relationship between his beloved granddaughter and Takehiko had seemed good. He had seen it himself. It was precisely because Takehiko had potential as a future pillar of support that he had approved the marriage. So why had Natsu so resolutely broken off the engagement after learning the truth about Takehiko? Could the conversation have covered more than just Takehiko? Gozo Hitamoto suddenly realized. It must have been something else in that discussion that stimulated Natsu. But what? Gozo Hitamoto couldn't help but wonder. Knock, knock, knock. The sudden knock at the door interrupted Gozo's thoughts. His brow furrowed. This untimely interruption gave him a bad feeling. Natsu, go sit over there. If it was one of those useless fools, he didn't want them bothering his precious granddaughter any longer. Gozo Hitamoto motioned to a spot along the wall. Somewhere not easily seen from the door. He then walked over and opened the door. The moment he saw who it was, his expression turned dark. Hitamoto Ichiro. A shameless fool who didn't know the meaning of decency. What are you doing here? Gozo Hitamoto didn't speak to this grandson with even a fraction of the warmth he showed Natsu. Grandpa. Hearing that voice, Natsu, seated quietly against the wall, immediately knew who had arrived. Grandpa, I want to ask you for a favor. Don't even think about it. Gozo didn't even let Ichiro finish. He coldly rejected him outright, his face dark and his tone steeped in disgust. I don't care what you're thinking. If you want to live as a parasite, go ahead. But don't drag Natsu into your worthless mess. Huh? This has something to do with me? Natsu Hachimoto, listening nearby, was confused. She didn't know what Ichiro had said to upset her grandfather so much, but it seemed related to her. Why? Why? Ichiro's voice turned frantic, almost unhinged. They were going to let Takehiko marry Natsu, so why can't I? Marry me? Hearing this, Natsu's eyes widened. She quickly covered her mouth to suppress any sound. She had never had any feelings for Ichiro. If anything, she'd never seen any hint from him either. But now she understood why her grandfather was so furious at Ichiro's visit. Ichiro had came to propose something like this. Right in front of Grandpa. Humphrey. Your parents really passed on their disgusting genes to you. Gozo Hatamoto didn't hide his contempt. His glare was filled with loathing, as if he were looking at garbage or some vermin crawling on the floor. Gozo had tried to stop his daughter from getting involved with her cousin back then. But the result had been her turning into a domineering shrew. That was the moment Gozo Hatamoto realized what kind of person his daughter Mariko truly was. From that point on, he had stopped caring about her marriage and simply let her do as she pleased. But in his heart, Gozo looked down on Mariko's entire household. Seeing Ichiro only reminded him of those two disgraceful people. As for Ichiro, an inbred product of that union, Gozo naturally held him in disdain. Now, this close-blooded relative wanted to lay his hands on Gozo's beloved granddaughter? This level of shamelessness could only have come from his mother. Impossible means impossible. I would never approve of someone like you. Low, incompetent, and utterly nauseating. Marrying Natsu. Gozo Hatamoto had said something similar before. This was the second time he made it clear. Even if Takehiko has ulterior motives, at least he has ability. And you? Humphrey. You have nothing. You're a low-level, half-baked painter. Do you really think you can support her? You're nothing but a burden. Ichiro, humiliated and crushed, trembled as he stood there, fists clenched tightly. So no matter what, Grandpa will never allow me to marry Natsu. That's right. I will never agree to your delusional fantasy. But at that moment, Gozo Hatamoto didn't notice the flicker of murderous intent in Ichiro's eyes as he lowered his head. His trembling stopped. Suddenly, Ichiro pulled a kitchen knife from behind him and lunged toward the old man, his own grandfather. In that instant, the flash of cold steel froze Natsu's mind completely. Her thoughts were cut off, her consciousness and sense of time frozen in place. Her brain quickly rebooted, thanks to the image now seared into her retina. Ichiro, holding a kitchen knife, was charging at Grandpa. About to stab him in the abdomen. At that moment, she finally understood what that boy had meant before he left. Time had seemingly stopped. But her body, too, felt frozen with it. Natsu Hatamoto's thoughts began racing. If the kitchen knife pierced Grandpa's abdomen, it would be fatal for someone his age. They were at sea. If they couldn't give immediate first aid, Grandpa would surely die. Her mind reached that conclusion. And panic surged. What should I do? What should I do? She didn't know when this frozen state would end. But once it did, Ichiro's knife would be in her grandfather's stomach. Suddenly, a sentence she'd heard not long ago echoed in her mind. If you encounter something you can't handle, perhaps believing in the power of faith is also a good choice. The power of faith? Natsu, who had never been a believer, didn't trust in faith at all. But right now, she had no other options. If you want to repay me, then believe in me. I don't want Grandpa to die. I don't know who you are. But if believing in you can help me change Grandpa's fate, then please, give me the power to change Grandpa's fate. Chapter 201, Changing Destiny. Then, according to your prayer, I will grant you the corresponding power to change this fate. The boy's voice suddenly echoed in Natsu Hatamoto's ears. Immediately after, a surge of extraordinary power flowed into her body, and a massive amount of information flooded her mind. At that moment, when Natsu Hatamoto focused again, she felt as if she instinctively knew exactly what to do. There was no need to think. Once her body could move, time would resume. Click. Suddenly, a strange sensation surged through her chest, and she instantly realized that the frozen moment in time was about to restart. With that mysterious feeling, her body also began to move, though the world around her remained in slow motion. She understood it was only due to the unknown power that had just entered her. Natsu's gaze sharpened, and without wasting a second, her body sprang into action. She moved swiftly, accelerating as fast as she could in a single step. As the tip of the blade neared her grandfather's body, she planted her foot and leapt into the air, speeding up once more. Her body spun midair, delivering a powerful kick to Ichiro Hatamoto's hand. The one gripping the kitchen knife. At the exact moment fate was about to be rewritten, the slowed time snapped back to normal. Crack. Gozo Hatamoto was still frozen in shock at the sight of Ichiro drawing a knife when a foot came flying in, slamming directly into Ichiro's wrist. All he heard was the crisp sound of bones breaking, and then Ichiro's hand was violently smashed into the doorframe by the impact. Gozo Hatamoto remained dazed. But with a shrill, guttural scream, Gozo finally snapped back to awareness. Ah! The scream, like a pig being slaughtered, rang throughout the entire cruise ship. When he came to, Gozo saw his granddaughter standing tall, one foot still raised as she pinned Ichiro's hand to the doorframe. He even noticed that the wooden panel had caved inward under the force of the blow. He couldn't even begin to imagine how much strength Natsu had used. The sharp heel of her high-heeled shoe had pierced through Ichiro's hand, pinning it. And the knife he held firmly into the doorframe. Blood streamed down the panel. Natsu removed the heel that had pinned Ichiro's hand, then quickly grabbed her grandfather's arm and pulled him away from the source of danger. Her heart was racing. It had been close, far too close. If I hadn't been here. If I hadn't had that power. Grandpa might have been stabbed to death by Ichiro. The thought of that outcome filled her with dread. And then, after the fear, came the anger. She glared at Ichiro, who was now slumped against the wall in agony, his hand still dripping blood. At that moment, Natsu finally understood why her grandfather looked down on people like him. They really were trash. After experiencing something so terrifying, all of Natsu's remaining compassion toward those relatives was shattered. These people didn't deserve sympathy. Looking at Ichiro howling at the door, all she felt was cold indifference. Soon, the Hayasaka family's bodyguards arrived from the adjacent room. "Help me. Save me." Bang. Without hesitation, one of the bodyguards kicked Ichiro, who was still pinned to the wall by his hand. Ag! The blow knocked Ichiro straight to the floor. Because his hand was still embedded in the panel, the sudden pull on the wound caused him to let out another scream. His tears flowed uncontrollably, and he writhed in pain. "So noisy." A calm, emotionless female voice echoed behind the bodyguards. It was Hayasaka Ai, dressed in her maid uniform, approaching slowly. She looked down briefly at Ichiro, who continued to cry and scream on the floor, but didn't spare him a second glance. Instead, she turned toward the two still shocked people in the room and gracefully lifted the hem of her skirt in a polite curtsy. "Good evening, Miss Hatamoto. It seems things have unfolded just as we expected." Hayasaka didn't seem surprised at all by Ichiro's attempt to murder. It was something she had foreseen. Everything Ichiro had done was simply a consequence of his own choices. Before assigning the rooms, we had already installed surveillance in the area. Our bodyguards were filming nearby just now. Based on his actions, I believe the judge will charge him with attempted murder. 10 years would be a reasonable sentence. Mr. Gozo, do you have any objections? Gozo, who had now recovered from the chaos, looked around at the scene and at the maid's arrangements. This was indeed the best way to handle the situation. No. Hayasaka nodded slightly. In that case, Mr. Ichiro Hatamoto will be placed in our custody. Once we disembark, we will notify the authorities and allow the police to take over the investigation. After saying this, Hayasaka turned her gaze back to the half-conscious Ichiro. She waved her hand. Send him to the confinement room. Treat his wounds. He still has 10 years of prison to face. Yes, miss. The Hayasaka bodyguards immediately carried out the order. Of course, their handling was anything but gentle. Rough, even brutal. After all, the only instruction was not to let Ichiro die. Pain, however, was not off the table. When they forcibly removed the hand that had been nailed to the doorframe, Ichiro let out another miserable scream. But none of the bodyguards reacted to his cries. They were all trained professionals, ruthless and unbothered. Once Ichiro Hatamoto had been dragged away, the source of noise was finally eliminated, and the room grew quiet again. Hayasaka glanced at the blood-stained doorframe and the smeared floor, then gave a slight bow. Mr. Gozo, this room has become unsuitable. Please move to the room directly across the hall. I don't believe anyone else will come to disturb you tonight. Gozo Hatamoto exhaled and nodded with a rare bit of gratitude. Thank you very much. Then I'll take my leave. With that, Hayasaka departed, leaving the room in silence. Now that everything had quieted down, Gozo Hatamoto could only feel a dull ache in his head. A weakling like him actually dared to try something like that. I really underestimated him. But more than anything, what truly surprised him was Natsu. Now that he had calmed down, Gozo realized that her explosive strength and sudden reaction earlier were completely abnormal. After some thought, he realized he needed to have a proper conversation with Natsu. Natsu, let's take this opportunity to talk. It seems it's finally time I handed the Hatamoto family over to you. Chapter 202, Rigorous and Caring Maid. Hayasaka had no interest in the restrained Ichiro Hatamoto. Attempted murder carried a long sentence. With enough evidence, it could even warrant the maximum penalty. And those hands. According to what Hayasaka knew, Ichiro had graduated from a professional art academy. For an art student, one's hands were everything, but Natsu Hatamoto had nailed his hand to the door frame with a high-heeled shoe. Judging from the dented panel, Hayasaka could say with near certainty that if his hand were only given basic treatment, it would be permanently ruined. But she didn't care. For the next 10 years, Ichiro would rot in prison. With both hands crippled, he might end up in a psychiatric facility after release. Was there any point in caring about someone like that? What Hayasaka cared about more was Hatamoto. A seemingly weak and ordinary young lady had just demonstrated power far beyond expectation. Was this the power Ren had given her? It was hard to believe Ren had granted such power even when he wasn't physically present. Suddenly, Hayasaka paused, straightened her posture slightly, and gave a formal bow to the air in front of her. "Good evening, Ren." In the darkness, a figure slowly emerged. "Good evening, Hayasaka," Ren replied. "Thank you for your help with the Hatamoto family." Ren returned the greeting politely and expressed his gratitude for her handling of the Hatamoto incident. Think nothing of it. Hayasaka didn't consider this situation troublesome at all. Compared to the young lady she served, this was trivial. Dealing with the Hatamoto family was nothing more than a small matter. But Hamamiya-san, did something happen on your end? Ah. Ren hesitated slightly when it came to his own situation. Chika got the diary. After drawing her reward, she came to ask about it. I explained what it was, including the side effects. I also told her I could suppress them if needed. But right after she drank it, the side effects erupted. Is Miss Fujiwara alright? Hearing that the side effects had flared up, Hayasaka frowned, unable to suppress her concern. Ren shook his head lightly. She's fine now. But during her initial loss of control and corruption, she saw some terrifying images. Her emotions were completely out of control until just now. That's why I couldn't leave. I had to calm her down. I see. Hayasaka fully understood that Fujiwara encountering such an unexpected issue would explain Ren's delay. She didn't know what Chika had seen, but knowing how emotionally resilient she usually was, the fact that she'd fallen apart made Hayasaka not want to know. Hayasaka-san, you received the diary too, right? Yes. In that case, Maria and Sage Anamiya should have also received one. It seems the spread of the diary still centers around you, Ren-san. The people who come into contact with you first or the key characters in our narrative are gradually being chosen. Ren agreed with her assessment. The distribution of the first batch of diaries wasn't easy to analyze, but the second batch had shown a clear pattern. We can probably make that conclusion for now. As for the rest, we may need to wait until the third wave. Ren didn't linger on the topic. Instead, he turned his attention toward the cruise ship's layout. The soundproofing on this cruise ship is excellent. The screams earlier echoed through the halls, but no one from the other rooms came out. Of course. This is a private ship designed for exclusive banquets. If a wealthy client's event lacks proper soundproofing, it can lead to a lot of trouble. Besides, we also need to be prepared for situations like this one. Hayasaka had specifically considered these factors when selecting a ship designed for private events. In the future, we'll probably need to account for unexpected disruptions whenever we go out. That means extra prep for our club activities. To this, Ren could only offer sincere appreciation. Thank you for all your work, Hayasaka-san. Not at all. Hayasaka smiled and shook her head. If it were in the past, it would have been exhausting. Back then, Oko placed constant pressure on me. I had to report Kaguya-san's daily life to that bald man every day. The guilt weighed me down and became an invisible burden. But since breaking free from Oko's control, I no longer have to carry that guilt day after day. I'm finally out of that constant state of explosive stress. Now, the maid work I do daily actually feels like the least stressful part of my life. Her work was still just as busy as ever. But mentally and physically, she no longer felt overwhelmed. Everything moved smoothly. Aside from the occasional chaos caused by Kaguya, almost nothing truly stressed her out anymore. These days, her daily tension stayed well below the danger line. She hadn't had a breakdown in ages. And honestly, she was quite content with this life. Besides, I've had the chance to follow Kaguya-san into a magical world I'd never imagined. For me, that's been a wonderful experience. Having mastered the door fruit, she had came to understand how meaningful and unique power could be. For that, she was deeply grateful to Kaguya for bringing her into such an extraordinary world and allowing her to see beyond her former life. And then, there was Ren. She was even more thankful to him, for giving Kaguya the opportunity to break her chains, and for giving her the chance to escape the endless betrayal that once caged her. Only someone who had descended into that kind of hell could understand how suffocating it was. But she had escaped it, almost effortlessly, and all thanks to Ren. To her, Ren was truly someone irreplaceable. Chapter 203, Scumbag. The next morning, the cruise ship was still en route to Tokyo port. To ensure a safe and stable voyage, the ship's speed during the night hadn't been particularly fast, maintaining a steady, optimal pace. Thanks to the cruise ship's stability, the calm sea, and the quietness of the rooms, everyone on board had a pleasant night. Kaguya sat up in bed, but there was no one else in the room. Hayasaka? No response. Fujiwara-san? Still no response. That left the just awakened Kaguya feeling a little strange. She tilted her head, trying to rouse her foggy mind and figure out where the two had gone. Her body stayed frozen for a long time, her brain seemingly caught in a delay. After 5 minutes, Kaguya finally straightened her tilted head and turned to look out the white window. Is it already morning? The bright light outside helped bring some clarity to her groggy mind, and her vacant expression began to fade. It's already the second day. Kaguya clearly remembered everything that had happened yesterday. She had officially confessed to Ren. And not only that, but the confession was witnessed by everyone. After that, she fainted during the exercise, likely because of Hayasaka's dimension-shattering ability. When she regained consciousness, she was already back in her room. Yes, I confessed to Ren. But because those people had interrupted at the time, she never heard his answer. Thinking of this, Kaguya dropped back onto the bed. She started tossing and turning restlessly. Hayasaka. Ugh, she's not here. Whenever she ran into trouble, her first instinct was still to rely on the all-capable Hayasaka. But the moment she called out her name, she remembered that Hayasaka wasn't in the room. She looked at the large clock mounted in the center of the room. It was 6:04 a.m. Early morning. Normally on weekends, she'd still be enjoying the warmth of her bed. Kaguya recalled that Hayasaka always started her duties early, so she probably had already gotten up. I remember Ren works on weekends, but he usually wakes up a little later. In order to better understand Ren, Kaguya had investigated his entire daily routine beforehand. He wakes up about an hour later on weekends than on school days. That means, based on his past habits, he probably wasn't up yet. With that in mind, Kaguya was now fully awake. She genuinely cared about the answer to her confession. Only by hearing it could she confirm whether or not they were officially dating. Yes, at this moment, Kaguya wasn't even sure whether she and Ren were in a relationship, since she never got a response. All of a sudden, she sprang up from the bed. She walked barefoot into the bathroom, washed her face, brushed her teeth, then changed into an outfit different from her usual attire. She tied her long hair with a ribbon and stood in front of the full-length mirror. Her appearance was no different from her usual refined look. Well, I'm ready. After confirming her appearance in the mirror, she took a deep breath and stepped out of her room. The rooms assigned to their group were located fairly close together, as expected for a group booking. However, since Ren was the only boy among them, his room was slightly separated from the girls' section. Still, it was only a short walk away. Kaguya took a deep breath and gently knocked on Ren's door. She made some quick mental adjustments while waiting. But when the door opened, her composed smile instantly vanished. Hayasaka? Why are you in Ren's room? The one who opened the door was none other than her maid, Hayasaka Ai. She wasn't dressed like a proper maid at all. She was in a nightgown. There are a lot of reasons. Miss Kaguya, you should come inside first so we can talk. Seeing Hayasaka's face full of things left unsaid, Kaguya momentarily held back her questions and entered the room. Inside, Ren was seated on a single sofa, while Chika was lying on the bed. The scene looked rather complicated. However, factoring in Hayasaka's earlier words, Kaguya didn't immediately assume anything inappropriate had happened. She just found it strange that all three of them were in the same room. Seeing the confusion on Kaguya's face, Hayasaka closed and locked the door behind her before stepping forward to explain. Miss Kaguya, a lot happened last night. First of all, Miss Fujiwara got the diary. Of course, so did I. To lend weight to her explanation, Hayasaka pulled out her diary and showed it to Kaguya. The second batch? Kaguya blinked, surprised by the diary in Hayasaka's hand. Then, with a calm look, she turned toward Chika, who was still sleeping on the bed. So, what exactly happened with Fujiwara that resulted in you and Ren being in the same room? Yes. With Hayasaka's confirmation, Kaguya gave a slight nod. That explained why Chika, a girl, would be in Ren's room. Miss Fujiwara took the same power system drug as Ren. Unfortunately, what didn't happen to Ren did happen to Miss Fujiwara. Because of the side effects, Miss Fujiwara was frightened once. If no one is around her, her emotional state becomes unstable. So, for now, she needs someone to stay with her. That side effect is way too intense. Kaguya was a little stunned, but when she saw Chika curled up on the bed with a frown on her face, she couldn't help but feel worried. Normally, she found Chika annoying and troublesome. But still, she didn't want anything bad to happen to her. Is Chika okay? She's fine. Hayasaka looked at Kaguya. She hesitated briefly, unsure if she should say more. But considering Chika's behavior later would be impossible to hide from Kaguya anyway, she went ahead and added, but since she was frightened, she still needs someone by her side for now. And Miss Fujiwara is a little clingy. As she said that, Hayasaka subtly glanced over at Ren, who was sleeping on the sofa. In an instant, Kaguya understood. And the concern on her face vanished in a flash. Sure enough, this woman is still a scumbag. Chapter 204, Kaguya's complaints. Although she was fuming over Chika's shameless behavior deep down, Kaguya didn't actually say anything out loud. She understood how unusually optimistic Chika was. Always smiling, and not in a fake way. She genuinely radiated cheer and positivity. But now, even someone like her had completely collapsed emotionally. That alone showed how serious the mental shock must have been. The last time Chika had such a reaction was when Ren had exposed the ugliest aspects of human nature to them. Everyone had thrown up back then. Chika, the eternal optimist, included. And this time, it seemed even more serious than that. So, fine. She let it go. Then what's with your appearance right now? Kaguya understood the general situation, but she still couldn't ignore the fact that Hayasaka was dressed in a nightgown. Because it wasn't appropriate for Ren and Miss Fujiwara to be left alone in the same room. If you walked in and saw just the two of them, it could have caused a huge misunderstanding. So, I took the initiative to stay with them. As for the nightgown, well, I need to sleep too. You wouldn't want me to stay up all night, right? Then, Hayasaka leaned in closer. Besides, if I sleep with her, she won't drag Ren into bed. How could that woman possibly do something like that? Kaguya felt Hayasaka didn't understand Chika well enough. She was just about to retort when, Miss Kaguya, yesterday Miss Fujiwara told Amamiya that he perfectly fit her criteria for a potential partner. That one sentence made Kaguya choke back the words stuck in her throat. This was the first time she'd heard something like that. She actually said that? Yes. Kaguya's expression stiffened. She really hadn't expected that Ren would meet all of Chika's criteria for a partner. Wasn't she just spouting nonsense? Hayasaka added at just the right moment. From my observation, she wasn't joking. She said she likes hard-working boys. But because of her family background, she rarely sees guys who are truly hard-working. Kaguya completely understood that statement. The Fujiwara family's situation was even more complicated than that of a major conglomerate. As a politically entrenched family, they operated under a special set of conditions, and there were naturally many restrictions in place. The key part was what Hayasaka had said. Chika likes hard-working boys? Seriously, that requirement alone eliminates almost every guy in Shuchen. From what Kaguya knew, among the boys in Shuchen, there were almost no ones like Junon who truly embodied hard work. Most of the mixed-grade students were hardworking by default. After all, that was how they got into Shuchen. The most typical example was Shirogane Miyuki. He was the epitome of a hardworking student. Kaguya inhaled deeply, trying to calm the stuffiness building in her chest. Then why not President Shirogane? Because something about his vibe feels off. So, Ren's vibe is right? That sentence came out with a lot more grit in her voice. In response, Hayasaka pointed to her own face, then pointed to Ren sleeping on the sofa. Making Kaguya instantly understand the real reason. Oh, I get it. So aside from the vibe, it's also about the face, huh? In her mind, she subconsciously compared Ren and Shirogane's faces. Yeah, it's true. Shirogane, who's always buried in studying, constantly has dark circles under his eyes. Definitely a minus. Ren might look sleepy at times too, but at least his dark circles weren't as extreme. Objectively speaking, Ren really did have a much better looking face than Shirogane. Fine, whatever. It's all a matter of time. Their fates were already entwined anyway. Chika getting the diary too made it inevitable she'd grow attached to Ren. Now it's Chika. And also Sanoko. And probably more to come. From that perspective, Kaguya actually felt a bit more at ease, at least Chika's case wasn't completely incomprehensible. Having adjusted her emotions, she now more or less understood the situation among the three people in the room and what had happened yesterday. Hayasaka, what happened outside while I was asleep yesterday? Miss Kaguya, here's what happened. Hayasaka gave a brief explanation of yesterday's events, especially regarding the Hitamoto family, the bloody drama within their ranks, and how Hitamoto Natsu had ended up becoming one of Ren's followers. So it was part of the preparations Ren is making for the future? Kaguya nodded slightly. She didn't fully understand the reasoning, but since it was part of Ren's long-term plans, then it should be fine. Perhaps he intended to take care of the Hitamoto family later. But speaking of the Hitamoto family, she still couldn't help but feel exasperated. The Hitamoto clan isn't even that large, yet they're a mess. And this Hitamoto Ichiro is totally unhinged. Just because the old man forbade close relative relationships, he wanted to personally stab his grandfather to death over it. Doesn't he realize who's responsible for his cushy life right now? She hated her own father deeply, and yet even she never considered killing him. She still had some sense of shame. Even though she once considered using force when she gained power, she never thought about wiping them all out. And this guy? Just because the old man rejected close relative marriage, he actually tried to kill him? Wow. Real filial behavior. As expected from someone born of close relative marriage. His very existence proved the old man was right to ban it. Hayasaka had the same opinion. Right now, it feels like only the puppet monarchy still wants to maintain that filthy bloodline. Keep the royal blood pure? That's the root of why these so-called royals are all brain-dead. Kaguya couldn't help but complain inwardly. Hayasaka agreed completely. Although cousin marriage wasn't legally banned in Japan, anyone who went through with it obviously had something wrong in their head. In the end, children born from close relative marriages nearly always ended up with genetic defects. In a conglomerate family, the point of marriage wasn't to preserve the bloodline. It was to exchange genes efficiently. Like a political marriage. Chapter 205, Intimate. If I were to look at the problem from the old man's perspective, I'd probably feel just as much of a headache. Trying hard to protect the only normal person in the family, yet surrounded by so many abnormal relatives constantly stirring up trouble. At this moment, Shinomiya Kaguya also felt a hint of sympathy. As the pillar holding up the last thread of normalcy in the Hitamoto family, the old man, Hitamoto Gozo, must have experienced countless moments of helplessness in his lifetime. How did Miss Hitamoto react? She resisted fiercely. When Hitamoto Ichiro committed the crime, she used the power of Amamiya to stab high heels into his hands and shattered the bones in both. Kaguya nodded approvingly. That's the behavior of a normal person. Even if they're close relatives, there should still be boundaries. How can someone who's already in university still be so ignorant? Science makes sense. Science does not allow close relative relationships for a reason. Because the side effects are significant. The offspring often end up with genetic defects. Now, Kaguya really wanted to know how Ichiro Hitamoto even got into university. Even if it's an art school, there should still be some basic scientific literacy, right? After disembarking, hand over the suspects and evidence to the police. This clearly constitutes intentional homicide. With solid evidence, there's no way they can overturn it. This kind of case was serious enough that it had to follow the formal judicial process. As for the outcome, there was no need to overthink it. After this incident, Kaguya didn't think the old man would hold any lingering affection for these family members. Most likely, once they got off the boat, he'd cut ties completely. As for Hitamoto Natsu, Hayasaka, remember this Miss Hitamoto. If she proves useful to Ren in the future, lend her a hand. Suddenly, Kaguya paused, glancing at Ren, who was still asleep, before turning to Hayasaka. Do you think this Miss Hitamoto will become one of Amamiya's believers? Hayasaka already had her answer. I didn't believe it before because I had never seen it. But having experienced it myself, I now believe Miss Hitamoto will become Amamiya's most loyal believer. There's actually only one criterion for whether something becomes a belief. Do you believe in it or not? And what better way to awaken belief in the mysterious than through direct experience? Because of that, Hayasaka was certain that Hitamoto Natsu, who had experienced that power firsthand, would undoubtedly become one of Ren's loyal believers. And in that case, there was nothing wrong with helping her. Although Hayasaka said this was just a casual act by Ren, if needed, these casual acts were actually a form of preemptive preparation. They might even serve as an emergency resource one day. Most importantly, this was a way she could support Kaguya. That alone made it meaningful. At that moment, Fujiwara Chika, who had been sleeping peacefully in bed, suddenly sat up. Ren. With a dazed expression, it was clear she was still half asleep. But due to the impact of yesterday's events, she subconsciously sought out the presence that made her feel safe, her gaze immediately locking onto him. In that hazy state, she lifted the blanket off herself, barefoot and still in her nightgown, and stumbled over to the single sofa where Ren was. She habitually tugged at her nightgown, then sat directly on Ren's lap, leaned against him, resting her head on his neck, and curled her legs up beside his. Her movements were smooth and practiced, as if she had done it countless times before, executed without hesitation. Kaguya looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She. Kaguya was so furious she couldn't even breathe. Hayasaka quickly covered Kaguya, who looked like she was about to explode. Calm down, Miss Kaguya. Fujiwara-san just experienced something traumatic. According to Amamiya, there were serious side effects and pollution involved, and Fujiwara-san was also frightened. Those words were barely enough to keep Kaguya calm. But seeing Chika, who had clearly stored all her nutrition in her chest curled up in Ren's arms, Kaguya trembled uncontrollably. She hadn't even done anything like that yet. She had already confessed to Ren and was just waiting for his response. But even as the potential girlfriend, she hadn't gotten this far. And Chika, that girl, got there first. How could Kaguya not be furious? She was about to die from anger. At that moment, Ren, still asleep, felt a sudden weight on his body and a warm, ticklish sensation on his neck. He subconsciously opened his eyes. And froze? Fujiwara? He looked down and saw the girl curled up on his lap, her body nestled into his arms, and her head resting on his shoulder. The whole situation made Ren freeze in place. He shifted his gaze and saw Hayasaka and Kaguya standing there staring at him. Ren was completely at a loss, pointing at the girl in his lap with his left hand. What's going on? Hayasaka, seeing Ren's miserable expression, felt a twinge of sympathy. Sleeping on the sofa was already uncomfortable and now this. But she was sure Chika didn't do this on purpose. That girl wasn't bold enough, especially not in front of her and Kaguya. So Hayasaka slowly walked over. Fujiwara-san seems to have subconsciously sought you out after waking up, Amamiya. Ren's mouth twitched. This was indeed unexpected, but Chika was always prone to this kind of behavior at times like these. Losing control and being tainted by corruption, those weren't experiences normal people could go through. Chika was just an ordinary girl, kind of. After enduring something like that, it was inevitable that she'd be left with psychological scars. In that kind of condition, it was normal for her to instinctively seek out a person or place that gave her a sense of security. This kind of trauma couldn't be healed that easily. He glanced at Kaguya. Chika's situation could wait. He had more pressing matters to handle with Kaguya. Hayasaka, can I trouble you to look after Fujiwara for a bit? I need to speak with Kaguya. Hayasaka nodded slightly in response. Understood. Ren took a deep breath, carefully lifted Chika off his lap, and gently laid her back down on the bed. Then Hayasaka climbed onto the bed from the other side, embracing Chika to soothe her. That finally freed Ren up to turn toward Kaguya. Shinomiya, let's talk. Chapter 206, Official Ren brought Kaguya into the vacant room next door. After she had calmed down, Ren looked at Kaguya, who was neatly dressed. Shinomiya, I've thought carefully about your confession. I can clearly feel your emotions, and I understand how you feel about me. So I think this is something that needs to be addressed properly. Kaguya naturally understood that as well. Some things had to be made clear. At this moment, she felt a bit nervous, worried that Ren would try to give a vague or evasive response. Actually, at first, I took the whole dating thing Sanoko talked about rather casually. I always thought it was just for fun. But your sudden confession made me realize something was different. Originally, I was just a normal reborn person, planning to live an ordinary life. Get into a good university, then live as a normal working adult. But that opportunity before high school began was a turning point. Then a year later, just over a month ago, I gained enough power to change my fate, and my way of thinking started to shift. After I got this power, I also came into contact with you. But when I realized it was you too, I felt relieved. Sanzan-in is still a child, so she doesn't really count. As for you, Shinomiya, you were like a frozen shell. I thought only someone willing to reach out could melt that shell. So, back then, I just wanted to maintain a mutually beneficial relationship with you. In order to gain more, I shared my information, and in return, you maintained a balanced relationship with me after getting those benefits. That had originally been the ideal state of harmony that Ren wanted. Because the diaries acted as mutual restraints, and because of them, they could provide each other benefits, allowing a delicate balance to form between everyone involved. There could be fluctuations from interaction, but Ren had always worked to maintain that balance. From the start, Ren had never intended to pursue anything beyond interest-based relationships with Kaguya or the others. Because interests were the easiest thing to balance. But once emotion got involved, it became harder to maintain. Human feelings were variables. Once emotional factors entered what had been an interest-based relationship, the original balance became unsustainable. Just like now. What had once looked like a stable relationship completely collapsed in less than a month. The speed of change in their relationships had far exceeded his expectations. He had underestimated the ripple effects of the diary. Kaguya wasn't surprised at all. In fact, she had already guessed this from the start. That was why, in yesterday's confession, she had spoken her mind clearly. Because her instincts told her. You thought that if you didn't get too close to anyone, it would be easier when it was time to leave, didn't you? Yeah, I did. Ren didn't deny it. But looking back now, I realized that idea was too naive. I didn't expect things between us to develop so quickly. And that some relationships would deteriorate. Even though I haven't changed my desire to travel and explore, some of my ideas have changed. I've given up on the idea of keeping my distance from you. I guess. Some of the things I said back then were right. Our fates really are entangled. Ren had already came to terms with it. I should be the one saying these words. Well, some of it might not come out exactly right. After taking a breath, Ren extended his right hand toward Kaguya. Things around me will only get more complicated. There will probably be more girls involved in the future. Maybe the diary itself is a reflection of my fickleness. Even so, are you still willing to be my girlfriend? Without hesitation, Kaguya placed her hand in Ren's. Of course I am. Even if I still get jealous, considering our situation, I can accept it. What I can't accept is seeing you leave with someone else hand in hand. Holding his hand, Kaguya slowly stepped in front of him and leaned gently into his arms. Affection doesn't come from spending a long time together. Sometimes, all it takes is a moment. But it's precisely because of that moment that I want to make it last longer. Then she gently bumped her forehead against Ren's chest. But jealousy is a whole other thing. So this means we're dating now, right? Kaguya still felt like she was dreaming. She'd suddenly met a boy she admired, appreciated, and liked, and now she was dating him. That's right. Then I should be the first one, right? The lack of response made Kaguya pause. She slowly looked up and saw Ren's eyes awkwardly shift to the side. Suzuki Sanoko. The name popped into her mind immediately. Again. Suzuki Sanoko. She had been surpassed once before. Now, even though she had confessed first, she was still one step behind Sanoko. But how had Sanoko suddenly gotten ahead of her? Wait. Sanoko got a diary too? The only explanation for Sanoko getting ahead was the diary. So, Fujiwara isn't the only one who received a diary this time. Hayasaka too. What did Hayasaka say to me again? You just woke up. Ren's words reminded Kaguya that she had been asleep since last night, only waking up just now. The first thing she did after waking up was go straight to Ren's door. She had only learned about Chika's situation through Hayasaka, and Hayasaka hadn't had the time or chance to explain her own. Kaguya regretted sleeping so long. Why was she always the one falling behind after waking up? The thought made her feel a little bitter. Her again. It's always her. Ren didn't know how to respond. He had never dated anyone before, let alone dealt with the complexities of dating multiple girls. Shinomiya, so if we're dating, what exactly do we do? Eh? Kaguya was stunned by the question. It was her first time dating a guy too. She had no idea what she was supposed to do in a relationship. But there was one thing she had wanted to do for a long time. Let's change how we address each other first. Chapter 207, Unstable Chika. The first thing that changed after they became boyfriend and girlfriend was the way they addressed each other. Kaguya. Yeah. Hearing Ren call her name, Kaguya smiled. This was the beginning of a change. It truly made her feel like she and Ren had started dating. As for what to do after becoming a couple, that was another matter. Some things didn't need to be rushed. They could figure it out together as they went. Ren, you don't react as strongly to girls as you did in the beginning. Kaguya knew everything about Ren, including the fact that he wasn't good at dealing with the opposite sex. But in just over a month, he had already started to interact normally with girls. Looking down at the hand she was holding, it seemed like things had become much more natural now. That was a normal reaction. Ren still felt the need to justify himself. His strong reactions back then were simply because he had never interacted with girls before. In my previous life, I didn't have the chance to get close to girls. Even though I had casual contact during school, I never had a real relationship with any girl. Not even a single date. I was a virgin, both physically and emotionally, until the day I died. Even in the 16 years of my current life, the woman I had the most contact with was probably the boss lady who occasionally showed up where I worked. Ren didn't know if others were the same, but that's how it had been for him. He hadn't intended to react so strongly. He just genuinely lacked any experience with girls. This was the first time Kaguya had heard that. She had known Ren wasn't good with the opposite sex, but only now did she understand why. What's the boldest thing you've done with a girl, Ren? A kiss? Kaguya froze, and then suddenly realized when that kiss might have happened. Suzuki Sanoko again? Ren had just said he'd never had any relationship in his previous life, so the kiss had to have happened in this life. And among the girls Ren had contact with, the only one bold enough to kiss someone was Sanoko, who had just started dating him. Besides Fujiwara, I think someone else is starting to get on my nerves. The jealousy was heavy, but Kaguya didn't ask for a kiss directly. She still kept a relatively reserved attitude about things like that. It just didn't feel right in this atmosphere. It should happen on a more appropriate occasion. Besides, asking for a kiss right after they started dating would feel like she was just trying to catch up to Sonoko. That would be putting the cart before the horse. Her relationship with Ren wasn't about comparing progress with anyone else. It was about the voice in her heart wanting those good feelings to grow and bear fruit. Speaking of which, is Fujiwara's condition really that serious? Even though she said Fujiwara was annoying, she still cared. Yeah. She's on the same power system as me, but her situation's a bit different. Maybe because I obtained a characteristic, while she only used the potion to access the system. Ren believed the biggest difference between him and Chika was their wild card status. But as far as I know, the starting potion for a sequence shouldn't cause such a strong reaction. I don't know all the details, but something bad definitely happened to her during the awakening. She's fine now. The loss of control and corruption have subsided. But I'll need to keep an eye on her promotion going forward. Her current reactions are after effects, a psychological shadow left behind by the disturbing images she saw during the pollution. Because I was the one who suppressed her loss of control, she instinctively sees me as a source of safety. So when I'm not nearby, she has stress responses. Now Kaguya was sure something serious had happened to Chika. If Chika was exhibiting symptoms like that, then what she experienced had to be far more serious than what happened back on Tsukekage Island. But it wasn't just about safety. She wasn't trying to make assumptions about Chika's behavior. The reason she thought this way was because of what Hayasaka had said. Chika had openly said Ren met her ideal standards for a partner. So now, everything Chika did wasn't just because she felt safe around Ren due to the suppression. It was likely that part of her heart didn't resist Ren at all. Otherwise, Chika would never have behaved like that subconsciously. Of course, another big factor was that Chika had also gotten the diary and joined them. Ren, let's head back to the room. Yeah. The two didn't say they were holding hands, but as they returned to the next room, they subconsciously let go. Back in the room, Chika sat up again. Hayasaka was sitting beside her, gently trying to comfort her, though it had little effect. Chika was still half asleep and half awake, and the shock from earlier had left her spirit tense and strained. Even though Ren had calmed her down earlier and brought her back to a stable state, her body was still showing stress reactions. Ah! Amamiya. As soon as Ren returned to the room, Chika instinctively reacted to his presence, her spirituality picking it up instantly. Just like before, she walked barefoot, staggering toward him. She opened her arms and threw herself into his embrace, burying her entire face into his chest. In response, Ren carefully hugged the mentally unstable Chika. This time, Kaguya didn't feel jealous. She could clearly see that Chika's mental state was unstable, and her abnormal behavior proved it. She could tell that Chika was asleep, yet even her sleeping reactions made it seem like she had been pushed to her limits. Chapter 208, Jealous Kaguya. For some reason, Chika felt that she had slept more peacefully today than any other day. I don't know what's wrong with the bed today. It feels a bit hard. But it smells really nice. She rubbed her face against the hard surface out of habit, then reluctantly opened her eyes. But the first thing she saw wasn't her bed, it was someone's neck. Looking further up, she could see whose neck it was. Amamiya? Chika's eyes widened, her expression shifting slowly from astonishment to surprise, then to confusion, and finally settling into a playful smirk before turning into a look of contemplation. How did I end up in Amamiya's arms? She couldn't quite grasp the situation, so she tried to recall what had happened before she fell asleep. She remembered that after getting the diary, she read Ren's entry and received her first chance to draw. She got a bottle of magic potion. Suddenly, as the lingering drowsiness faded, her lost memories slowly began to return. The horrifying memory came flooding back like a maggot clinging to her bones. The wave of terrible recollection overwhelmed her, nearly suffocating her. Yes. That's it. That horrifying memory had resurfaced. Her heartbeat quickened, her blood pressure rose, and her body began trembling slightly from the overwhelming emotion. She remembered that, at that time, it felt like her entire world was crumbling. But just as she was about to break, she felt a trace of warmth return to her body, and her voice, which had been too weak to speak, gradually regained strength. She knew someone could save her, as long as she called out his name. All the suppressed memories awakened at that moment. She remembered that after calling his name, she entered a strange place. There, she saw Ren, and her shattered world began to piece itself back together. Even now, just thinking about it made cold sweat trickle down her back. But her wildly beating heart slowly calmed when she remembered Ren. That inexplicable sense of security made her relax. Although she still didn't fully understand what was going on. It was fine. Chika didn't dwell on why she was in Ren's arms anymore. At this moment, the feeling of security made her feel completely at ease. As for that horrifying memory, She didn't think she'd forget it anytime soon. As long as Kaguya didn't find out, everything would be fine. Chika thought carefully. Just as she was about to close her eyes and go back to sleep, a stiff cough made her frown. She turned toward the source of the sound, annoyed. And then froze like a cat caught red-handed stealing fish. There stood Kaguya, her face filled with resentment, eyes burning with barely concealed jealousy and bitterness. And behind her, Hayasaka stood expressionless as usual, but there was a clear glint in her eyes. The joy of watching drama, mixed with a tinge of envy? Chika, who had just been frightened, suddenly felt like the world had changed. At this moment, she felt as though she could see everyone's emotional shifts and the thoughts behind them. What are you staring at, Fujiwara? Kaguya was practically seething with jealousy. She had just started dating her boyfriend, and already he had to hug another girl to calm her down. She understood why, and the girl he hugged was her friend, so she couldn't even throw a fit. Just like she had said before, she could accept the complicated and special relationship between them, but that didn't mean she wouldn't get jealous just by standing by and watching. She would still be jealous. She would still get angry when it was called for. In fact, her jealousy might even be stronger than before. Huh? Chika was stunned as she looked at Kaguya. She could clearly see Kaguya's conflicted emotions and her intense jealousy. Since you're awake, shouldn't you be getting off, Ren? Only then did Chika realize she was practically lying across Ren's lap, her body nestled against his arms, and her head almost buried in his shoulder. No wonder the first thing she saw earlier was a neck. No wonder the bed felt so hard. She curled up instinctively, even her bare feet were resting on Ren's legs. Imagining how she must have looked, Chika's face instantly turned pink. She could accept sleeping in Ren's arms, but not being stared at like this. She quickly pushed off of Ren using his shoulders. Hee. Sorry, Kaguya. I stole your Ren. Chika jumped down and turned to Kaguya with a flushed face and a playful grin. Well, it's not like he was mine to begin with. The way Chika said your Ren was oddly satisfying to Kaguya. Really? But the way Kaguya addresses Ren has changed, hasn't it? Just like how Ren and Sanoko did back then. And when Kaguya saw me sitting on Ren, she was really jealous. That kind of expression. I've never seen you make it before. Kaguya froze and subconsciously touched her face. Did she really show that kind of emotion? Yeah, it was pretty obvious. It's the first time I've ever seen Kaguya so jealous. As she spoke, Chika's face bloomed with a radiant smile. So, Kaguya is acting so jealous because Ren responded to your confession, right? PFFT. I got it right. So, does that mean Kaguya and Ren are officially dating now? Faced with Chika's teasing smile, Kaguya couldn't keep up her calm facade anymore. Fujiwara, what nonsense are you saying? No matter how hard she tried to play it cool, all of Kaguya's emotions were clearly visible in Chika's eyes. Jealous Kaguya is so cute. That one sentence completely shattered all of Kaguya's mental defenses. Anyway. Get up already. I'm going out with Hayasaka. Unable to endure Chika's teasing stare any longer, Kaguya turned and grabbed Hayasaka before storming out of the room with her. Chapter 209, Agreement with Fujiwara. After Kaguya took Hayasaka out, Chika finally let out a long sigh of relief. What just happened? She couldn't understand how she had been able to clearly see through Kaguya's real thoughts, discover that Kaguya seemed to be dating Ren, and even pinpoint her emotional flaws to the point where Kaguya couldn't take it and ran away. This is the extraordinary ability of the spectator. She turned around immediately upon hearing the voice and saw Ren stretching his slightly stiff body. She could also sense Ren's current emotional state, discomfort and embarrassment, which matched her understanding of him. Chika now re-evaluated the power she had gained. The spectator's spirituality and observational skills are both exceptional. It's because of this that a spectator can perceive information others can't, and from there deduce someone's true thoughts. As I said before, low-sequence spectators do not possess outstanding combat capabilities. Spectators are not meant to fight initially, they are observers. This is also preparation for Sequence 8. Telepathist. Once promoted to Sequence 8 Telepathist, your perception will become even sharper. You'll be able to grasp others' thoughts more precisely, and even read minds. After moving his body, Ren carefully explained and introduced this to Chika. I already think my current ability is amazing. Although she still didn't know what kind of power system she had entered, Chika genuinely thought that the spectator's extraordinary ability was already incredible. To be able to see through someone's true thoughts with pure observation was beyond imagination. From what she knew, abilities like this could only be developed through years of accumulated experience. But she had gained such a power just by drinking one bottle of magic potion. It was unbelievable. There are also significant side effects. That one sentence brought back yesterday's unpleasant memory, and Chika's body trembled slightly. It was truly one of her worst experiences. She glanced at Ren sitting on the sofa, then quickly looked toward the door, and in the next moment jumped into Ren's arms. Once in his embrace, the familiar sense of peace finally stopped her trembling. Ren. What exactly happened? It was hard for her to imagine how she had ended up in such a terrifying state. Loss of control. Corruption. This is the price of gaining power. However, even as he said this, Ren's expression was filled with confusion. I actually warned you about this issue before you drank the potion, but I didn't pay enough attention myself. Why? Chica didn't understand. Because low-sequence potions aren't supposed to be that dangerous. They don't usually result in loss of control or mental contamination like what happened to you. If it were a self-made potion, maybe, but the diary gave you a pre-prepared potion. The likelihood of something going wrong was even lower. My spirituality didn't give me any warnings. And in fact, that should have been correct. This was also a strange issue for Ren. As someone who had walked 3 pathways, his sense for danger was extremely sharp, especially when absorbing the spiritual imprints within potions. He had always been keenly aware of any potential crisis. But in Chica's case, that sensitivity had given him nothing, which made the whole situation even more unusual. Of course, there was another point that was even stranger. In fact, losing control is almost an irreversible state. Only someone of a higher status can suppress its effects. I do possess that level of status, so I was confident I could suppress the reaction. But what actually happened was, I only used my spirituality to comfort you, and your symptoms of losing control vanished. The pollution in your mind completely disappeared right in front of me. It wasn't hidden. It was completely erased. I believe that's why my spirituality didn't issue any warnings. Because it didn't see it as a crisis. Since it wasn't a crisis, there was no spiritual alert. This was the answer Ren had arrived at. But he also reflected on it deeply. I relied too much on my spirituality. I should have been more cautious. I should have done a divination about your condition before letting you drink the potion. If I had known in advance, I never would have let you go through something so awful. Listening to Ren's explanation, Chica finally had a clearer understanding of what had happened to her. So, in the end, what happened to me was just an accident. Absolutely not. Ren's tone was firm. There are no such things as accidents in the world. What happened to you was due to my miscalculation. I can even feel right now that the loss of control and mental contamination you experienced was inevitable. Fujiwara, remember this. The sequential path we're walking doesn't believe in accidents. Many so-called coincidences or accidents are actually destined outcomes. Even though I still don't know why it happened to you, from now on I'll pay much closer attention to your condition. Ren still didn't know why this had happened to Fujiwara. But not knowing didn't mean the matter was over. This wasn't the end. This matter couldn't be considered resolved just yet. He would get to the bottom of it. And if it was connected to that bizarre atom in the secret realm, then one day, he'd rip his head off. Yeah. Hearing Ren's resolute tone, Chica couldn't help but smile slightly. Even though it had been an awful experience, the outcome didn't seem so bad now. Then, she buried her face deeply into Ren's chest. The warmth and comfort dispersed the fear and trauma from the experience, making her feel much better. If I get scared again in the future, can you hold me like this? Ah. Ren was a little taken aback. He hesitated for a moment, but remembering that her situation was directly caused by his carelessness, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. If you're afraid. That's good. After getting his permission, Chica felt her fear fade away even more. Chapter 210, Feeling of Love. After staying in Ren's arms for a long time, Chica's mood gradually stabilized. Although she wanted to stay like this, thinking of Kaguya waiting outside made it inappropriate to keep clinging to Ren. But she couldn't bring herself to get up so easily, because curling up in Ren's embrace was just too comfortable. After lingering for a while, Chica slowly lifted her head. Looking at Ren's face so close to hers, she shifted slightly with a hint of shyness. Kai. Her lips gently touched Ren's cheek. The kiss didn't last long, but it left Chica's face burning. This was the first time she had shown such a direct gesture of affection. Or admiration. Toward a boy she liked. As she had said before, she had always been a young lady raised in a proper household. But compared to Kaguya, she was luckier. Her family's status was high enough that the 3 sisters didn't need to be involved in any political marriages. They actually had a high degree of freedom in choosing their partners. Of course, that freedom didn't mean they could choose anyone, but it did mean they had a range of acceptable choices within certain circles. So, Chica had always been very reserved. Even though she yearned for the romantic love she saw in manga, she wouldn't casually choose just anyone as her partner. It was just that Ren was a little special. If he had only a normal identity, then Ren's background would definitely be unsuitable, but his hidden identity made him very suitable. At the very least, Chika believed that her grandfathers wouldn't object. The only one who might be unhappy was her father, but that didn't matter. Her father wasn't as stubborn as the two old men. "Ah, don't get the wrong idea. I just kissed you to express my gratitude. I really didn't mean anything else." Chika blushed and tried to justify her impulsive act. Once he came back to his senses, Ren looked at Chika, who was right in front of him. He knew now that another girl had become emotionally involved with him. "Well, let's just go with that for now." Hearing this, Chika's face turned even redder. She knew Ren didn't believe what she had just said. In fact, even she didn't believe it herself. Because only she knew what she truly felt. Just like Ren said, "Let's just go with that for now." That was the answer closest to what she actually hoped for. With a flushed face, she responded softly, acknowledging Ren's words. "Change your clothes first. Hayasaka moved your luggage from your room yesterday." Ren genuinely admired Hayasaka's attentiveness. She had already anticipated what might happen today and made arrangements in advance. Chika poked her head out of Ren's arms and glanced around the room. She spotted the suitcase she had brought with her. "Then, you tidy up in here first. I'll head out." She needed to change clothes, so of course she couldn't let Ren stay in the room. She wasn't that thick-skinned. So she had to send him out. Standing up, Ren felt his stiff body finally begin to relax. It wasn't that he hadn't wanted to move before, but Chika had been sitting on him the whole time. His body had stiffened, and he hadn't even dared to shift. Taking a breath, Ren was just about to leave when he saw Chika standing there with her hands behind her back, her toes twisting slightly. She looked like she was waiting for something, and he paused for a moment. Thinking about her mood, Ren took a deep breath, stepped forward, lifted his hand to gently brush aside the pink bangs covering her forehead, and placed a light kiss on it. It was the first time Ren had taken such an initiative with a girl. He wasn't even sure if he had done it correctly. "Don't be afraid, Chika. I'll wait for you outside." After saying that, Ren quickly turned around. Truthfully, he felt a little embarrassed. "I'll go out first." It wasn't until Ren left the room and the door closed again that Chika, who had just been kissed on the forehead, slowly came back to her senses. She raised her hand and touched the spot where she had been kissed. Only now did she realize. Ren had just kissed her. So, that's what a boy's kiss feels like. Her face flushed red, and her hands unconsciously pressed against her chest. She could clearly feel her pounding heartbeat. It hadn't been a particularly romantic setting, yet that kiss had left a deep impression on her. She couldn't help but recall how she had kissed Ren on the cheek earlier. So, does that mean Ren and I feel the same? Her heart suddenly started racing, and the blood rushed to her face. Chika felt like her whole face was on fire. But the strong emotion welling up from deep within made her smile foolishly. After a while, she slowly turned around. Still unable to stop smiling, she tiptoed and lightly made her way to her suitcase. "Mom, I think I might really be in love." At that moment, Chika truly understood that her sudden feelings may not have been a coincidence. After opening the door and stepping out of the room, Ren saw that only Kaguya was standing outside. Turning to the side, he saw the couple from the Hatamoto family, Hatamoto Marco and Hatamoto Kitaro, standing a short distance away in the corridor. They were looking anxiously at Hayasaka, who stood facing them calmly. Hatamoto Ichiro's parents. Ren naturally recognized the couple. Yesterday, Hayasaka had placed the information she gathered in front of him, and he had already reviewed their files. First thing in the morning, don't tell me they couldn't find Ichiro Hatamoto in his room? Yes. Kaguya nodded slightly and glanced at the couple, her expression devoid of emotion. That pair set a very poor example. Ichiro Hatamoto must know his parents are cousins. It's hard to imagine he doesn't. Ren didn't believe such a thing could be kept a secret. The old man has a strong dislike for Ichiro's parents. He probably hoped to limit the family's negative reputation by keeping them close. It's not like they have good genes. A close relationship doesn't mean excellent bloodlines. Kaguya agreed with this. Scientific research shows that children born from close relative marriages tend to have problems. Either mentally or physically. Ichiro Hatamoto may not be physically deformed, but his mind definitely is. Maybe, when he proposed to marry his cousin, he didn't even consider whether she was willing. If he could get Miss Hatamoto's agreement and propose with her together, there might have been a chance. Ren nodded slightly but asked the most critical question. Kaguya, do you think Miss Hatamoto would agree? Kaguya sneered and shook her head lightly. Of course not. No normal person would have that kind of affection for a cousin. And I doubt Ichiro Hatamoto has the charm to make Miss Hatamoto willing to throw everything away for him. Chapter 211, Detective full of curiosity Miss Hayasaka. Mariko Hatamoto was unusually humble at this moment. She knew the girl in front of her, despite being younger than her son and serving as a maid, held an extraordinary identity. the maid of the Shinomiya family's princess, and the eldest daughter of the Hayasaka family. Compared to their own family, the Hayasaka family was a giant. She didn't dare to maintain her previously arrogant attitude. After my husband and I woke up, we went to look for Ichiro, but we couldn't find him in his room. The space on this cruise ship is quite large, so we'd like to ask for your help in finding him. Mr. Hatamoto Ichiro? Hayasaka's voice was flat and emotionless, which only made the couple more uneasy. If you want to look for him, now is not an appropriate time. Not appropriate? Mariko and Kitaro didn't understand what she meant. I do know where Mr. Ichiro Hatamoto is. But for now, he can only remain there until we disembark. Hayasaka's cold tone made the couple even more unsettled. Suppressing the unease in her heart, Mariko still forced herself to ask, Miss Hayasaka, did Ichiro do something inappropriate last night and offend you? Hayasaka shook her head slightly. Mr. Ichiro Hatamoto didn't offend me. He did something even more outrageous. Since you are Mr. Hatamoto's parents, I'll give you a clear answer. Just last night, Mr. Hatamoto held a kitchen knife and nearly stabbed Mr. Gozo to death. At that moment, Mariko and Kitaro's breathing stopped. The shock nearly made them faint on the spot, and their legs went weak as though they were about to kneel. They knew very well how furious the old man would be if something like that happened. And now they were hearing that their son almost stabbed him to death with a kitchen knife? These words were far too extreme. So extreme that the couple could hardly believe their son was capable of such a thing. But neither dared to say so. After all, the Hatamoto family was not the Shinomiya family. The Shinomiyas had no reason to joke about something like this, especially not on their own cruise ship. This likely meant it was true. Their son really had confronted the old man with a knife and nearly committed murder. This. Mariko simply couldn't believe that her son, self-effacing and somewhat timid, was capable of something so insane. Hayasaka could fully understand the couple's shock and disbelief, but reality was cruel. This was also infuriating for the Shinomiya family. What was supposed to be a pleasant weekend trip nearly turned into a murder scene on the return journey. Fortunately, Mr. Gozo wasn't stabbed. Otherwise, it would have been a very traumatic memory for Miss Kaguya. Furthermore, Mr. Gozo has already decided to turn Mr. Ichiro Hatamoto over to the police for attempted murder. Those words struck the couple like thunder. It was over. That was the only thought in their minds. Right now, they felt as if the sky had collapsed. Allow me to remind you both, it was the Shinomiya family who provided the evidence. Hayasaka's final reminder shattered what little hope the couple had left. If it had just been the old man's personal matter, they might have tried pleading for leniency. But if it was the Shinomiya family who had the evidence, then there was nothing they could do. Causing a scene would only make things worse for them. The Shinomiya family's power far exceeded what they had imagined. The couple was completely crushed. Seeing them collapse, Hayasaka felt no sympathy. Frankly speaking, their son's actions were deeply connected to them. The root of Ichiro Hatamoto's madness may well have stemmed from their marriage. With this matter settled, Hayasaka no longer paid attention to the collapsed couple. She glanced toward the far end of the corridor, then returned to Kaguya's side. At the far end of the corridor, a child was leaning against the wall, one hand over his chest, which was beating violently. Their eyes met. Even at such a distance, he had still been discovered. Conan had to admit, the maid of a major family was something else. That cold, scrutinizing gaze felt like it had completely seen through him. It was deeply unsettling. But what surprised him more was that, despite being so careful, he had still been noticed. He had heard that the Hayasaka family had always served the Shinomiya family. Despite being a high-status lady herself, she still worked as a maid. From his perspective, this maid was clearly more than just a maid. She was likely also acting as a bodyguard. Conan felt his guess was probably right. But this arrangement wasn't particularly unusual. After all, Hayasaka was Kaguya's exclusive maid. It was natural for her to have some combat training. Still, the idea that Ichiro Hatamoto had nearly murdered his own grandfather was deeply shocking. And the Shinomiya family even had evidence. Well, with all the hidden surveillance cameras on this cruise ship, that wasn't surprising. This didn't surprise Conan either. Given that the cruise ship belonged to the Shinomiya family, it was entirely reasonable for them to install surveillance cameras throughout for security purposes. As for the charge of attempted murder against Ichiro Hatamoto, there was no issue at all. With clear evidence and no forgiveness from the victim, he was definitely going to prison for at least 10 years. Of course, that outcome wasn't something Conan needed to be concerned with. But what was the motive? What kind of grudge would drive a grandson to try and kill his own grandfather? Conan shook his head at the thought. There didn't always have to be a reason. As long as it wasn't a murder case, it wasn't his concern. The detective in him couldn't help but ponder the question. But since this wasn't a full-on murder and hadn't resulted in irreparable harm, He hesitated, then chose to let it go. The inner workings of wealthy families were always complicated. As an outsider, he didn't need to think too deeply about it. But what piqued Conan's curiosity more was Amamiya Ren. Chapter 212, The Great Detectives. Amamiya Ren, a student in Class C of the second year at Ditton High School, had above-average grades, but wasn't particularly outstanding in other areas. He wasn't good at socializing and rarely interacted with classmates. In short, he wasn't a very sociable person. He had no parents and grew up in an orphanage. On weekends, he worked part-time to earn money and had always lived a very disciplined life. When Conan reviewed this information, it all seemed very ordinary. At best, it was the inspirational story of a hard-working student from a humble background. He admired people like that. According to the information he'd asked Dr. Agasa to investigate, it really hadn't been easy for Ren to make it this far. He was supported by the orphanage in the beginning, but after it closed, he lived alone. He worked to earn a living while continuing his studies, without engaging in any social activities. This steady routine had lasted more than 6 years. From an objective standpoint, his life was admirable. However, beginning in his second year of high school, or more precisely, about a month ago, Ren's situation changed completely. Conan didn't know how Ren's social life was at school, but he did confirm that he had joined a club. The Occult Research Club. This club felt extremely strange to him. Because Conan was sure of one thing, Ren had always disliked and feared anything related to the occult. So her joining this kind of club was suspicious. Ren was already a member of the karate club. Why would she join the Occult Research Club for no apparent reason? The club's membership was also questionable. Besides Ren, most of the other members were high society young ladies. This, too, was unusual. While it wasn't strange for Ren to be drawn into Sanoko's social circle, how had someone as ordinary as Amamiya Ren gotten involved? It couldn't be that he was actually related to Sanoko. Right? Based on what he'd investigated and his natural curiosity as a detective, Conan couldn't help but grow increasingly interested in the hidden truths surrounding Ren. Perhaps asking directly would have been a viable approach. Unfortunately, after losing the identity of Kudo Shinichi, he had also lost the right to ask directly. All he could do was investigate and analyze through the eyes of a detective. Leaning against a wall, Conan took out his notebook and pen, flipping to the relevant page in his notes. So far, none of the evidence directly pointed to any hidden secrets behind Ren. However, the possibility of Sanoko being in a relationship with him remained. And not just Sanoko. The possibility existed for others too. Why did he think that? Because according to the data he gathered, the Occult Research Club hadn't opened recruitment to outsiders. Almost all of its members were invited personally. Under these circumstances, Conan was certain that Ren had either done something special to earn the invitation or had formed a romantic relationship with one of the existing members. The most likely candidate? Sanoko. Not because of anything concrete, but simply because he understood Sanoko well enough and also didn't dare look too deeply into the other young ladies. Investigating girls from powerful families could very easily lead to trouble. He didn't believe those heiresses were like Sanoko. They weren't raised casually. Digging into their background recklessly might lead to being counter-investigated. After recording today's speculations, Conan carefully left the area. There were still many surveillance cameras on the cruise ship. It was best not to act too suspicious. Just as he thought, a pinhole camera was recording the corridor from a hidden spot, its feed routed directly to the monitoring room. "Miss, the child has left." The security staff had been watching him the whole time. Once he started acting suspicious, they had increased surveillance and notified their young lady by phone. Understood. Continue monitoring him. Make sure the child doesn't engage in any suspicious activity on the cruise ship. Also, compile and organize all footage for me before we disembark. Understood. After hanging up, Hayasaka put away the phone and looked at the two people in front of her. It seems he's grown curious about Ren. Kaguya sighed, looking both helpless and exasperated. Hasn't he learned his lesson from last time? Don't get involved in what you shouldn't. Don't investigate what you're not supposed to. Doesn't he understand such a basic principle? Ren appeared calm. More accurately, he knew exactly what kind of person Conan was. Curiosity is a detective's flaw. I think it's because my surface-level information is too plain. Then I show up around a group of elite young ladies, which is why he's intrigued. Ren pulled a maple leaf gold coin from his pocket and flipped it into the air with his thumb. The head side faced up. Well, looks like I guessed right. In truth, this outcome wasn't surprising. Even Ren himself knew that his presence in the club made him stand out far too much. What a troublesome person. At that moment, Kaguya truly felt that being a detective was an incredibly inconvenient profession. A detective is someone who's curious about everything. But don't worry too much. I've suddenly been surrounded by a lot of people, and with Sanoko and Ran involved, it's natural he'd take notice. He's probably wondering why someone like me would be around a bunch of high society girls. As Ren spoke, he flicked the maple leaf gold coin again. It landed heads up once more. Seems like he's still just curious for now. With my ordinary identity, he's definitely wondering why I joined the occult research club. From his perspective, he's likely starting his investigation with me. He flipped the maple leaf gold coin once more. Again, the head side faced up. The answer was clear. The repeated confirmation through divination made his deduction even more solid. Ren smiled, showing no concern over the detective's curiosity about him. Don't pay too much attention to what he's doing. To someone who believes in science, everything we do is irrational. Let him keep theorizing like a good little detective. Chapter 213. The first believer. The Hitamoto clan soon learned what had happened with Hitamoto Ichiro, but neither of the central figures, Hitamoto Gozo nor Hitamoto Natsu, left their room. That in itself made their position very clear. Hitamoto Marco and Hitamoto Kitaro were unusually silent on their way back. Because they both knew very well that the old man would not spare Ichiro this time. The charge of attempted murder was enough to make Ichiro waste his best years in prison. A conservative estimate for this charge was up to 10 years. But the key issue wasn't the 10 years. It was the old man's attitude. This time, Gozo had clearly decided to teach Ichiro a lesson by letting him rot in prison for a decade. That alone meant the old man had already made up his mind to take action against the rest of them as well. And once they came to that conclusion, neither of them dared to speak further. They didn't even dare to stir up trouble again, fearing they'd be made into public examples by the old man's wrath. However, by noon, Hitamoto Gozo and Hitamoto Natsu finally stepped out of the room. The old man's face was frosty, his expression unreadable. Seeing this, the members of the Hitamoto clan, already feeling the weight of impending consequences, didn't even dare to breathe. Takehiko, who had been ostracized from the Hitamoto family, had his gaze locked solely on Natsu. Natsu was different today. Takehiko knew Natsu far too well. In order to pursue her, he had studied her carefully. Her personality, her preferences, everything. Otherwise, how could he have gotten so close? But now, with all that familiarity, Takehiko could immediately tell that today's Natsu was not the same as the one he'd known yesterday. Hitamoto Gozo slowly led his granddaughter over to Shinomiya Kaguya. The old man began by showing the utmost respect. Miss Shinomiya, thank you for your rescue yesterday. The favor is already heavy, and for what happened last night, I must express even more gratitude. Gozo knew that he had been saved by his granddaughter yesterday, but the way she had suddenly erupted with power was obviously not normal. And immediately after, the Shinomiya family's bodyguards had rushed in, making it clear that even if his granddaughter hadn't acted, the Shinomiya bodyguards would have saved him. So, this gratitude was beyond question. Kaguya accepted the thanks with grace. She didn't act proud, simply nodding slightly. Mr. Hitamoto is too polite. It wasn't anything major. Perhaps not to you, Miss Shinomiya, but it was certainly major for me. Once again, I thank you. Kaguya gave a slight nod. She could overlook many things, but still hoped that others would understand where the lines were. She then turned her gaze toward the already demoralized Hitamoto clan. Mr. Hitamoto should handle internal matters properly. Don't waste this hard-earned opportunity. Hitamoto Gozo understood this well. After facing death the previous day, he had made a decision in his heart. He could no longer tolerate these parasites. If he did, they would eventually become a major obstacle for Natsu's future. Of course. Some reminders were enough. Kaguya didn't believe Gozo was a fool. A fool couldn't turn a company into a powerful conglomerate. And what nearly happened yesterday was no trivial matter. It was enough to make anyone abandon sentimental ties. Seeing that the conversation had run its course, Hayasaka, who had been standing behind Kaguya, stepped forward to shift the topic. Mr. Gozo, the cruise ship will arrive at the port of Tokyo in 2 hours. Please get some rest during this time. Preferably in a secure location. This was a polite but necessary suggestion. After all, there really was a madman among the Hitamoto family who had done something insane. In such circumstances, security was a top priority. Of course. Gozo didn't think those fools would try anything reckless, but he had misjudged Ichiro the day before. He wasn't about to take any chances this time. He wouldn't risk Natsu's or his own safety. From now on, he would be much more vigilant about the rest of those useless relatives. Then, I'll take my leave for now. Grandfather, I still have something to say. Just as he was about to leave with Natsu, Gozo paused when he heard her speak. He was slightly surprised, but still nodded and walked over to a seat nearby. Once seated, Hitamoto Gozo turned his attention to his granddaughter. Because of the distance and the quiet voices, he couldn't hear what was being said. But what he needed now wasn't to hear, it was to see who she was speaking to. Following Natsu's line of sight, he noticed she was looking at a boy among the group of high society girls, someone Gozo didn't recognize. "Miss Haramoto, do you believe in faith now?" "I do." This time, Natsu answered without the slightest hesitation. The reason faith often fails to spread is because miracles are rare. But once a miracle does appear, faith becomes the fastest thing to propagate. Haramoto Natsu had never believed in gods. Her elite scientific education had made her skeptical, even dismissive of such notions. But once a miracle actually happened, one that saved her grandfather, she immediately accepted the existence of divinity. And the boy standing before her was the god who had descended to this world. That devout faith was evident in her eyes. Ren could see it without needing to confirm it. The knowledge in your mind and the power you've received are gifts of your faith. You made the right choice. You changed your destiny, and also your grandfather's. For me, this was a successful trial. I'm curious to see what choices you make next. If you still wish to change things, very well. Then begin with your family. Spread my name. Bring in more believers. If you succeed, I'll grant you greater rewards. How does that sound, Miss Haramoto? Of course, I'm willing. God. To Haramoto Natsu, the boy before her had already become a true god. She would naturally accept any mission granted by him. The name God is a bit excessive. Let's go with this instead. From now on, Miss Haramoto, you may call me the Fool. Yes, Mr. Fool. Chapter 214, The good days of our clan come to an end at 3 p.m., the cruise ship docked at the port of Tokyo. The police, already informed, promptly arrived with a team to make an arrest. Several bodyguards escorted Hiramoto Ichiro, whose hands were bandaged, off the cruise ship. It was the first time today that Mariko Hiramoto and Kitahiro Hiramoto saw their son. His face was haggard, his expression lifeless, his eye sockets sunken. Even through the bandages on his hands, bright red blood still seeped out. The pitiful sight made Mariko Hiramoto cry out. "Ichiro! My Ichiro!" She couldn't even imagine what kind of treatment her son had endured before he was subdued yesterday. But she had no right to complain. Because they both knew this was the result of his own actions. If he hadn't gone to the old man with a knife, he wouldn't be in this condition now. Ignorance is no excuse. Gozo looked at them coldly, snorting with disdain. He was completely done with these people. Now that they had disembarked, he would begin taking action the following day. His gaze swept across Takehiko, who stood at the edge of the crowd with a dejected expression. It was a pity. The original plan for Candidate 15 would now be scrapped. But Gozo had no regrets about this change. He had realized just now that his granddaughter seemed to have established deeper ties with the young ladies group. Takehiko's skills and work ethic were commendable, and it was a shame to cast him aside. But since that was Natsu's own decision, he would respect it. Compared to Seishiro, Natsu's entry into the elite circle was far more significant. That widened network could provide much greater long-term benefit than anything Takehiko could offer. So it was better to discard this now useless chess piece entirely. They would likely never cross paths again. At that moment, the entrance of the cruise ship was surrounded by Inspector Magure and his team. Attempted murder was no small matter. With irrefutable evidence in hand, there was no need for further delay. As long as they secured the suspect and evidence, the case would soon be closed. The bodyguards handed over Hiramoto Ichiro, then presented a plastic evidence bag containing a blood-stained kitchen knife, along with a disc containing the video footage. This is the weapon used by the suspect, and the disc contains a full recording of the crime. Inspector Magure examined the items. These would be formally reviewed later. Officer Sato, secure the evidence. Yes. Sato Mueko stepped forward to collect the items. With the weapon and full footage in hand, the case was essentially airtight. No one could dispute the facts. She glanced at the suspect. Blood still seeped through the bandages on his hands, indicating he had already been punished. The bodyguards noticed Sato Mueko's gaze. In order to avoid any complications involving the young lady or Miss Kaguya, they gave an explanation. The injuries to his hands were inflicted by the granddaughter of the victim. Officer, please note. This was an appropriate and lawful act of resistance to stop the crime. The footage clearly shows how the injuries were sustained. Inspector Magure nodded. Understood. We'll need to confirm the case details more thoroughly. The bodyguards understood protocol. Miss Kaguya has already stated she will fully cooperate with the investigation. The cruise ship will remain docked for the time being, and the police may conduct their investigation on board. The crew is familiar with the situation at the crime scene. However, Ms. Kaguya may not be available for questioning, as school resumes tomorrow. Inspector Magure breathed a quiet sigh of relief. He hadn't expected Miss Shinomiya to be so cooperative. As for her not being available for questioning, it was understandable. This was, after all, an attempted murder, not a completed one. And the suspect had no direct connection to Miss Shinomiya, so there was no need to involve her in the follow-up investigation. Of course. That's more than reasonable. The bodyguards nodded and stepped aside, as people began disembarking from the cruise ship one after another. At the front of the group, naturally, was the Hitamoto family. Mr. Hitamoto Gozo, as the intended victim, we hope you'll accompany us to the Metropolitan Police Department for formal statements and verification. Thank you, officer. Gozo did not refuse. He understood that his statement was essential to ensure that Hitamoto Ichiro, that delusional fool, ended up where he belonged. Behind bars. This would also prevent anyone else from developing any misguided thoughts. Natsu, come with me. I'm here, grandfather. As for the rest of the Hitamoto family, Gozo didn't spare them a single glance. And Hitamoto Natsu, walking beside him, never once looked back at the so-called relatives behind her. At this moment, she no longer viewed those people as family. After her grandfather was nearly stabbed to death by her cousin, Hitamoto Ichiro, Natsu had completely severed emotional ties with them. She was thoroughly disappointed in what they represented. From here on, Natsu knew her focus was no longer her family. It was on Mr. Fool, the one she now believed in. The other Hitamoto clan members trailing behind looked at the grandfather and granddaughter walking ahead, feeling a suffocating weight above their heads. A dreadful sense of foreboding was undeniable. It looks like the old man has made up his mind. Hitamoto Shoji sighed helplessly. Ichiro's reckless actions had completely destroyed whatever remained of Gozo's familial compassion. And Shoji himself was caught in the fallout. Still, he understood. The old man would no longer indulge anyone's fantasies. Shoji braced himself. He'd likely need to liquidate his businesses once they returned. Otherwise, surviving would become extremely difficult. Why is it always Natsu? Oki Hitamoto, dressed in a revealing V-neck dress, seethed with rage. She had never been the favored one. Back when her parents were alive, their attention had always gone to Natsu. After their deaths, their grandfather doted on Natsu alone. As the older sister, Oki had always been overshadowed. No matter how hard she worked, she received no recognition. Now, everything was slipping away completely. Oki felt only despair and powerlessness. Beside her, her husband stared at her with dull eyes. He had married this woman for money, but now that was crumbling. And with it, all hope. Chapter 215, Summary Gathering. After leaving the port, everyone took one of the Sanzan-in family's spare cars to Sanzan-in Nagi's residence. Considering there were still matters to wrap up, it was fitting to conclude things at Nagi's home. Soon, the car pulled into the Sanzan-in estate. A massive villa where one had to drive all the way up to the entrance just to reach the house. The entire property was enormous. Without someone guiding you, you could easily get lost inside. Sanzan-in. Your house is really huge. Even though he had seen it before in pictures, Ren couldn't help but be amazed by the size of the estate when seeing it in person. Aside from a group of bodyguards and Maria, it's just you here. It's kind of a waste to have such a huge place. A place this empty really did feel like a haunted mansion at night. The Kuto residence was one classic example of a haunted house, but Nagi's home could arguably top that. The person being mentioned, Nagi, wore a complicated expression. Honestly, she also felt her house was a bit too big. The scale was unnecessarily excessive. While it was great for gaming, having only 2 people live in such a vast space felt undeniably lonely. At that moment, Aizawa Sakuya grinned and threw her arm around Nagi's shoulder. This girl never liked how quiet it was here, so she used to throw parties now and then just to fill the place with people. Back when she was still at Iku Academy, she was pretty popular. Everyone who knew her would show up to hang out, especially those teachers who just wanted free food. But ever since she transferred schools, there hasn't been a single party at home for over a month. If she hadn't made friends in her new school, I swear she would have died of loneliness by now. Go away. Who said I'd die of loneliness? Nagi slapped Sakuya's arm off her shoulder, seething with embarrassment. She felt like her dignity was about to evaporate under Sakuya's teasing. Well, Nagi-chan definitely isn't lonely anymore. As her close friend, Izumi was confident about that. Back then, Nagi-chan only played games at home. But after playing the same ones over and over, they stopped being fun. Now though, Nagi-chan has found new things to enjoy and can finally live out her middle school Chayunabiu dreams, so she definitely isn't feeling lonely. Nagi's face turned red with shame before she could stop the words from coming out. It was true. Her life had become more exciting lately. Especially after receiving her vision, everything had changed. Now she could do things she'd only dreamed of before. Flying through the air, controlling the wind to pull off all kinds of fun stunts. This new life of hers had pushed any lingering loneliness far away. And honestly, her second-year syndrome had been bursting out so uncontrollably, she didn't even want guests coming over anymore. Some of the things she'd done were so embarrassing that even she cringed thinking about them afterward. Ishimi, why do you? Because when I came by earlier, I saw little Nagi wearing some strange armor and leaping off the top floor over and over. She even let out an exaggerated evil laugh each time she jumped, so I figured she must be having fun. Oh. Tsukuyo's eyes sparkled with interest.